Hey everybody, welcome to the Sunday show here on the line, both in horizontal and in vertical form. Hi, or maybe hi. I don't know whether I'm on the top or the bottom on the vertical because I can't see it. I'm Matt. I'm here with Promise. Are we going to hell?
I'd love to find out.
We may already be there. Maybe that's a call we'll be getting.
That would make the most sense.
I find that one more plausible than that we might be going there, but we'll see. Welcome everybody to the Sunday show here on the line. This is a live call-in show where people can call in and talk about what they believe, why they believe it, and more importantly, why they think somebody else should believe it. Because I would acknowledge, I don't know what's going on in your mind, and I don't know, I don't know what it's like to be you. I don't know what the process is for experiencing and evaluating your experiences. But I do have a pretty good understanding of reason and logic and how we go about, different styles of epistemology and which ones are more reliable. And while I can't necessarily say what it would take to convince me that what you believe is true, I'd like to try to find out. Because if it turns out you have a good reason for believing something, like, for example, last night, Arden and I did a live stream on Morph Market to sell some of our animals. We breed exotic pets. And I can tell you about stuff that went on, and some of it you would have been able to see if you were live. But some of it happened behind the scenes. Like, you have no way of knowing that, Crush was in his water bowl and it took me extra time to wipe it off. All you can do is take the report, but it's not a particularly extraordinary claim. And I can talk about what it might take to convince somebody of that. You could have a really good justification for believing in a God, for believing in ghosts, for believing in an afterlife, for thinking, yes, we're absolutely going to hell. No, we're not going to hell. You could have a good reason for annihilation theory, any number of things. And that would be interesting. But if your justification doesn't apply to anybody else, I think I would argue under most circumstances, it's effectively useless to the rest of us. It may still be true, and you may have good reason to believe it's true. But, as David Hume famously pointed out, revelation is necessarily first person, and to everybody else, it's hearsay. And so it would carry the weight of hearsay, which is to say pretty much no weight. But we're open to be convinced. We are open to hear what's going on. And I'm thrilled to announce that I got a notification from Amazon, and I posted it up on Facebook, that on Tuesday, my pre-order of Promise's first book will be arriving. Promise, tell us all about it.
I am very excited. I have to say the foreword is one of my favorite parts of the entire book. And that was written, I'm not even joking. That was written by Matt here, which is the coolest thing ever. I guess you're right. Now I have to get used to pointing whichever direction you are. But I have
maybe make an L or whatever. Who knows?
Yeah. I have it here. I'm so excited that it's coming out. And I'm launching my podcast to kind of do almost like a book club throughout the summer. And the first episode comes out this week, and it'll feature a very special guest that may or may not be right here hanging out with me again. So all very exciting things. It's essentially the book that I wish I had when I first started questioning stuff. It would have helped things go a lot faster and smoother for me. It covers a lot of the stuff we talk about here, but I break it down in what I think is a pretty digestible form. I also wanted to write a book that people could give their still religious family members to kind of be like, look, here's all the things you keep saying to me. This is some insight as to how I'm thinking. Because I don't want to tell people how to think. I'd like to encourage people to think for themselves, and which is why I love Matt's foreword so much. And it even made me emotional when I read it, which says a lot, because I don't cry very easily. So it's good stuff. Go buy it for that reason alone.
Just buy it, order it, do yourself a favor. Because while I outlined 5 books, and one of the first ones, one of the ones that's the furthest along, but it's been on hold forever because I have a million projects, is called If I Were God. But prior to that, I had been starting on a book that was supposed to be about how to explain my atheism to my parents. Um, because I think that would be helpful for almost anybody. Like I said before, I don't claim to have any expertise in anything. If I'm good at something, it's a coincidence that I had to learn how to take complex topics and make them approachable to people. And okay, I don't suck at that most of the time, but I was hoping to do that for my parents. And I think what's happened is that Promise has probably written a book that I could maybe hand to my folks and they would understand kind of where we're both coming from. So I,
Well,
I will
that's heavy.
I will take no credit, but I will feel happy that in some way she might think I shepherded portions of it. But
Oh,
we're
a
here to
million
take your
percent.
calls. So, are you somebody who believes in a hell? That's the question for today, but you're not limited to that. If instead you'd like to defend the notion that God exists, or, you know, like last week's question was, is God hiding? Anything like that. At the end of the day, anybody who's a theist is going to get top priority on the show. And please, I say this every week. Nobody here, no matter what ends up happening, no matter how heated things get or irritated or whatever else, nobody here is trying to be a dick. Genuinely, we just like to know, why do you think we should believe what you believe? And that plus the fact that there is a delay,
Yeah.
those two things together are going to force us to pause, to interrupt, to ask for clarification. And here's something I learned years ago, because I've been doing this for 22 or 23 years, a couple decades. If somebody starts talking and they see something that's problematic, not well defined, or flatly incorrect at the very beginning of the call, and you let them run their script until they get to a point where it's natural to interrupt. When you go back to try to address the first thing, here's what ends up happening. Okay, back at the beginning, you said this. No, I didn't. Okay, I heard you say this. I'm trying to understand it. No, 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 that's not what I meant. And then they go on for several minutes about what they meant or trying to rehabilitate it. So it just became generally much easier to kind of interrupt for clarity early on. I know it's not the way a conversation would go if we were all sitting at the table. But you have to remember, there's also probably 5 or 6 people on hold as well. So we're just trying to make sure that the conversation is efficient and useful and beneficial to you, to us, to all the people watching, and so the people who are on hold aren't sitting there going, man, this person doesn't know what the heck. Why won't you guys just let me in? I can answer this. I can do better than this. I don't know that yet. So
Right.
if you're ready,
Well,
Promise, pick
I
us out
am.
some
And
callers.
on that note, we actually had a really lovely conversation last week. I don't know if you remember, our last caller was Jack. And
Yep.
that, I think, is a perfect example of when a conversation is going well, when someone's being honest, when they're engaging honestly. We enjoy talking to them. So much so that we told Jack, because we were at the end of the show, so unfortunately we had to end the call. We asked Jack to call back, and Jack has called back. So we are going
Yay.
to start the show off with our old pal, Jack. Hey there, Jack. You are live on the Sunday show with Promise and Matt. Thanks so much for calling us back.
Absolutely. Thank you all for inviting me back and having me on to share my views.
Yeah, I don't know how you want to start this. Do you feel comfortable kind of bringing us back like as quickly as you can to where we were at in the conversation and giving us a starting point from there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think
Great.
that the best way to perhaps regain ground from where we were last time is for me to state some sort of informal claim, and then we can go from there and see where we may agree and disagree. So, my claim is that God would give people just enough evidence to believe in Him if they are already so inclined, but not so much that it will overwhelm somebody who is not willing or ready to believe. And I think that this is, just so we clarify before we begin the conversation, I am not making a case for God's existence from the ground up. I am simply trying to address what seems like an internal inconsistency.
Sure. So this is kind of, if I'm understanding correctly, you're trying to explain the apparent hiddenness by saying, in your view, God would give people who are inclined to believe just enough, or would provide enough evidence so that people who were already inclined to believe would accept it, but people who weren't inclined to believe would not be overwhelmed and compelled.
Yes, that seems to be the case.
Okay. Then
Okay,
I guess the first question is, why is that what you would expect?
Fair enough. So I think that I was actually put onto this view when I was reading author Dale Allison up in Princeton Theological Seminary. He wrote a book on the resurrection of Jesus, and he concluded it by saying, knowledge is a function of being, and religious knowledge must be a function of religious being. And then he ties it to the beatitude, the pure in heart shall see God. And so he gave some examples from the New Testament, from people such as the disciples, from Mary and Mary Magdalene, and from most importantly, Paul, who were people who knew the Christian beliefs and even arguments, but especially in the case of Paul, did not convert until something experiential happened to them. It was not the arguments or even the claims of the Christians that convinced Paul, who was one of the foremost writers of the Bible, but it was his own personal experience.
Wouldn't you consider the Damascus Road experience the exact thing you're saying we shouldn't expect? Wouldn't that be overwhelming evidence for someone who was unwilling to believe?
Yes, I see what you're saying. Let me clarify further that when I'm talking about overwhelming evidence, I mean arguments from philosophy and some of the scientific arguments that you'll hear apologists propose. I'm saying that those arguments alone for Christianity don't seem to be enough to convince somebody, but it's only hand in hand with experience that somebody converts to believe in God.
No. So what my question here is that the evidence that Paul was presented with seems to be in direct conflict with what you're saying you would expect, that God would provide people just enough evidence if they were inclined, but not enough to overwhelm them if they weren't inclined. But Paul, by his own admission in the story, was not inclined and was presented with overwhelming evidence. So that's inconsistent with what you would expect from God, right?
Yes. So let me clarify further because I perhaps may have misspoken. When I say evidence, I'm speaking of non-experiential evidence, the kind of evidence that you would find perhaps in a laboratory when you're conducting biological experiments, or if you're a philosopher trying to argue for the existence or non-existence of a creator. So in Paul's case, he knew the claims that the Christians were making, and he was probably familiar with many of their apologetical arguments, but that alone was not enough for him because he wasn't experientially prepared to believe in God. It was when you have the reason coupled with the experience that he was able to believe. That seems to be the pattern throughout both the Old and the New Testament.
Can I get a little clarification real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely.
So you're saying like just enough evidence, but not overwhelming. But do you believe that this God knows ahead of time if that evidence will be convincing to that specific person or not?
Yes. My view of God is that he is all-knowing, including past, present,
it doesn't
and future.
matter if it's just enough or, quote, overwhelming, because no matter what, that God knows if it's convincing or not. So it's either convincing evidence or not, whether you want to rank it on a scale of what you subjectively might call overwhelming versus what you were saying would be just enough. Because no matter what, like that God knows, either this God is giving convincing evidence or is not giving convincing evidence.
Right. So I think that the way I view evidence and the way I view what is a convincing or compelling argument is more in a subjective sense. So there's a reason why you can present two people with the exact same data and they will come to wildly different conclusions, because the data might not be convincing on its own. But
Promise's point was that whether or not it's subjective, like I might expect a different or become convinced by different evidence than you would, and Promise might have a different standard than this. But if God knows all of our standards, God automatically knows from the get-go whether or not the evidence he's presenting is is compelling for that individual, and what evidence might be compelling for one individual may not be compelling for some other. And so God needs to decide, do I care to convince this person, and then provide that person with whatever is convincing, not what's over. By definition, whatever convinces you is necessarily overwhelming. It overcomes whatever resistance to being compelled you have.
That's a fair point to make. And I think that perhaps, just for clarification, are you getting into the idea that, or the question, why does God, because he knows exactly what will convince everybody to believe in him, why does he not give each person that amount of evidence or experiential reason to believe in him? Is that what you're getting at?
I don't know that
is
I'm
certainly
getting
part of it.
Yeah, for me right now, I'm still just stumped at the part. It's like, why do we even need to define it as, quote, overwhelming evidence or just enough evidence if no matter, it's either convincing evidence or it's not, and this God knows. So to me, the God is either intentionally convincing or intentionally not convincing the person based on that.
But and I'm sorry
Okay,
for a second, Jack,
get,
because I'd anticipate that you're getting ready to respond to that. But that was my well, I still have another objection, which is, why isn't a Damascus Road experience good enough for all of us? But let's say I have a standard of evidence and somebody else has a standard of evidence. Would you agree that it's possible that their standard of evidence is so weak that they would become convinced of other things that weren't true using that aren't true using that standard of evidence?
Yes, it happens all the time. Yeah.
Cool. I agree. So if God's fairly consistently providing in your model evidence to that lower standard that lets in other untrue things, but not enough to overcome the bar of, let's say, sound skeptical epistemology, then it would seem I have no way to tell the difference between that God existing and only providing sufficient justification for the gullible, or that God not existing and only the gullible are convinced for bad reason. How do I tell the difference?
I'm going to address your point in a slightly roundabout way. So if I fail to, please just interrupt me and correct me. But the way my claim is actually dealing with the kind of evidence that is external to experience versus experiential evidence. And we can even debate whether or not experiential evidence is evidence. But when I'm talking about evidence, generally, I'm talking about the philosophical arguments, historical arguments, et cetera, like we've already discussed. And so that is just plain across the board. Everyone, given the right education and opportunity to learn, has access to the same data. Now, what is different from person to person is the experience. And so it seems that the way that God has structured the universe, in my point of view, is that he is not so overwhelmingly present in any kind of empirical sense that even the strongest hard A atheist is unable to deny him. That doesn't seem to be the case. It seems that God gives us enough to believe in him if we're already so inclined, but not so much that we're going to believe in him if we're not inclined, because what matters most to God is loyalty.
Okay,
did I somewhat address what you're getting at, or feel free to correct me if...
Well, I mean, you were talking about it. I just don't know that. So here's the thing. I would agree that with loose exceptions, we'll get rid of, people with particular deficiencies or, who haven't heard. The arguments for the existence of God and the empirical evidence that one would say might support those things, or the facts that are consistent with those, whether it counts as evidence for or just facts consistent with, those are, in an idealistic sense, available to everyone. And you're drawing a distinction between those and the experiential evidence. And I guess my question is, how can we distinguish each individual's interpretation of their experience to determine whether their understanding of that experience is most likely correct? Because I think that's something that a God would be able to do. And a God would, I don't know if that's what you're calling overwhelming, that God overcomes these doubts. But when you say someone inclined to believe, isn't a gullible person inclined to believe things that aren't true, including gods that aren't real. So how do we distinguish between gullibly being inclined towards an untrue belief and non-gullibly being inclined towards a true belief?
So just for clarification, are you talking about us, say you and me, for example, and promise? We don't want to leave promise out. The three of us, if we were to examine someone's belief from a more external point of view, if we could conclude what they believe is correct or incorrect, is that kind of the idea you're getting at?
Kind of. I think we can stick with it with the three of us and say, would I be correct in saying, Jack, that in addition to the various arguments, you are convinced because of your experience?
I would softly say yes. Yes.
Okay. Do you think that your experience should be convincing to either of us?
No, I don't.
Do you think that if we had the experience you had, we would be convinced?
If so, I have not had an experience like Paul did on the Damascus Road. So there was no point in my life where I just had this overwhelming religious experience. And I think that my experience overall is a combination of the way perhaps that I just view life itself. And I mean, even you'll hear commonly people talking about they believe in God just because they can look at other people and they see life. And for them, that's enough to believe. And so that kind of like long lifetime of experience is kind of what I have experienced. I hope that was somewhat clarifying. So no, when you look at my life from your perspective, I don't expect you at all to be convinced based on the arguments I give alone or any of the small e experiences that I've had.
Okay, that's not what I was getting at. It's if
Okay.
I had whatever the experience tipping point is for you that goes beyond mere argument, mere analytical things. Whether it's, oh, you look around the world and you feel this, you experience that, whatever that is, you clearly feel that that ought to compel someone, right?
I feel that ought to compel me. And
okay,
I know that sounds perhaps shockingly subjective for
is truth
to give on the
subjective?
show. I didn't hear you. Sorry, would you mind repeating yourself?
Is truth subjective?
No, I don't believe truth is subjective.
So if in fact there is, if it is true that the God that you're convinced exists, then that is a non-subjective truth. And do you have something other than subjective interpretations of experience that convinces you of that truth that we have access to?
So I could sit on this show and talk with y'all all day long, and we could throw around ideas about the historicity of the resurrection or the arguments from contingency or teleology. But I don't believe that is enough to convince you, nor do I necessarily think that it should. So I think that what convinces people, and this is where I get back to the idea of it being an internal problem. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5, the pure in heart shall see God. And so that idea, not pure in terms of without sin, because none of us are without sin, and so none of us are inclined to see God fully, I believe. But I think that those who are open to him, once they interpret the different arguments for and against God, will be more inclined and should be more inclined to believe in him.
Can I ask, sorry, I'm kind of going back just one step, but
absolutely.
So the subjective evidence, I don't know if that's an okay term for it, that you have, part of your reason for being convinced. If somebody from another religion presented that same experience or subjective reasoning for why they believe, would you take that as sufficient reason for their belief?
just for clarification, are you asking if I would be convinced by their experience, or if they ought to be convinced by their experience?
If you would be thinking that that was a valid reason for them to believe, would you think that's a good reason for them to believe?
I will say generally yes, but of course it entirely depends on what it is they're believing. I think that a lot has to be said about the object of their faith.
Okay. I guess I'm just trying to understand
But
how much of your belief is made up based off of, things like uh, basic apologetics, and then how much is just like this personal thing to you that maybe some people would call faith, the thing that fills in the gap,
mhm.
basically. But we don't even have to get into that if you don't want to. Sorry, I keep going back, but there's little things I'm taking notes on. At one point
It's okay.
earlier, you said something about loyalty when you were talking about how like God doesn't want to
Mhm.
overwhelm somebody with evidence because he cares about loyalty above all else. Am I appropriately remembering that?
Yes, that seems to be the case. Just if I can
Okay,
clarify
so
it a little bit further, loyalty in God entails loyalty to goodness as well. So it's not just blind obedience to some kind of divine ruler, but it's also obedience to what is good and true and beneficial to all people.
sure, which I'm assuming under your definition of a God, you probably think God is representative of all of that. But my thing is, I don't understand how overwhelming evidence would take away from someone's ability to be loyal, because like I have overwhelming evidence that my husband exists. I'm also extremely loyal to him.
Mhm.
And a lot of that is because I have, like, obviously I have to have evidence of him and who he is and all these things. There's trust that's built there. So I don't understand how like an experience that's overwhelming, if that's the terminology we want to use, how does that take away from this like purity test of being loyal? Am I making sense with that question?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's probably the strongest objection I've heard made against my view of this, because um, and it absolutely makes sense, because like with the example of you and your husband, you would say, hey, I'm fully loyal to him, I fully trust him, he trusts me, but I'm also fully aware that he exists, and that doesn't detract from my loyalty to him, and vice versa. And I think that's a valid point to make. I won't claim to have the full answers as to why I believe God does this. I'm just addressing this as kind of an internal view within Christianity, that it seems that, especially in the New Testament, when you're reading the Gospels, Jesus uses intentionally vague language so that those whom God wants to call to him, he does through the language, but those who have already hardened themselves away from God won't understand. But I just want to say in humility that I don't have a full answer to this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, because to me, it doesn't
Mhm.
sound like the logic is there to back. I get it that you are looking at what what Jesus's message was and how he kind of communicated
Mhm.
and what you think he was communicating. And it does feel like trying to make logic fit that instead of the other way around, if that makes sense. And so I think that's where this argument loses me, is that I don't find it compelling because, if nothing else, that example of like the things that drive me to loyalty, to the most genuine loyalty that I have, um, is a lot of overwhelming evidence and a lot of mutual respect and lack of hierarchy and all of that. So I don't know. Maybe Matt has some questions now, but I think that's kind of where I land on this conversation.
Can I throw out a quick hypothesis as well? And I appreciate you, by the way, for bringing this up, because I think it's definitely something that Christians and theists in general need to be considering more than we do. So I think that
Go for it.
one hypothesis that someone could posit for why God does not overwhelm people and why loyalty seems to be uh, somewhat inharmonious with overwhelming empirical evidence. One hypothesis could be that the kind of loyalty that you seemingly extract from experiential uh, turning points, like Paul's Damascus Road experience, that kind of loyalty might just be that much stronger than the kind of loyalty that you might get from a an understanding that's solely based on empiricism and arguments from philosophy, etc. But I also want to, we don't know this for sure. That's just one hypothesis that could be made. Definitely
Sure.
something worth exploring. So thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, I think I might get back into there. I'm struggling with several things. You described, and I think correctly, what often convinces people, but I think what convinces people is almost certainly distinct from what ought to convince people. And so on a number of occasions, you've gone back to the Bible to talk about expectations. You talked about loyalty to goodness and truth. I don't necessarily know that, I care for that, description, but I certainly appreciate and would strive to be loyal to goodness and truth. But if truth is an objective fact, I don't see how a subjective justification is deserving of respect or loyalty, or how that subjective demonstration confirms the truth. And if goodness is the goal, I guess part of the question is, why would it be good to provide some people with the experience to compel belief and not provide that to others? And when you appeal to the Bible, sorry to pile on, I just took notes, but I definitely don't see that book or the character of the God in that book to be either true or good. So I don't know how you get to loyalty to good when the character in that book is advocating original sin, inherited sin, regulating and sanctioning slavery and inequality between the sexes, and substitutionary atonement, and then selectively providing a Damascus Road experience to one, the sort of experience for some, and not to others, and then making claims about, if you ask whatever you ask for, God will provide it and reveal himself and all that stuff. And then Promise and I sit here with what we thought were experiences when we were believers. And then when we learned about sound epistemology, all of a sudden those experiences go away, and God doesn't seem to show up to offer them again. So it's like the book advocates for God playing favorites. I mean, the Jews were his chosen people, and then later on he's going to decide who, by his grace, he is going to extend faith and salvation to. So I don't see any of this as true or good, and I don't know how you can get there from a subjective experience. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, I want to respond briefly to at least all those points briefly if I can. So if I miss one, would you please jump in and just kind of set me back on track?
I'll probably just wait. There's a lot there, and I want to give you some space, and I'll mute, but I'm taking notes.
Well, I appreciate that, and I should be taking notes as well. I failed to do that. That would have been a very good idea. But I think I'll start briefly with the character of God in the Bible. I have seen your slavery debate with Dr. Josh and the Knechtleys probably 3 times over. It was highly entertaining. And I will actually say I largely agree with your position that you take in that debate. And I don't believe that God sanctioned or desired the ownership of other people as property in the Old Testament. I am not fully on board with divine dictation theory when it comes to inerrancy in the Bible. So there are some things that are in the Bible that I think are incorrect. I think they're few and far between, and they mostly revolve around historical topics. But I'm not sure what to make of slavery yet, but I don't think it's consistent with my view of God. There's some views about the suzerain vassal treaty, which the Old Testament, the Levitical law was based off the ancient Near East suzerain vassal treaties. And in the Mosaic law, God is the suzerain, Israel is the vassal. And there are some historians who have proposed that the way that it's written is a kind of wartime propaganda, where when it says God is legislating slavery to the Israelites, it's actually a way of writing that the Israelites are pleading with God for slavery. Now, I'm not a historian, nor do I speak Hebrew, so I cannot say for sure or even anything close, but there are a number of ways around that. As far as why he would give some people these subjective experiences that they require to believe in him, but perhaps God doesn't give other people these subjective experiences that he knows would tip them to loyalty in him. Again, that's a great question, but I think that God will give people experiences when they are open to it. And you've probably heard something along those lines before. And in many ways, it can be a tired argument. Usually it's phrased in the way of, you have to stop sinning in order to see God, or if your heart is too sinful, God won't reveal himself to you. I don't think that's quite right. I think it's a little more psychological than that. I think that God reveals himself experientially to those who are already open to him. And so ultimately, he allows it to be a matter of free will, which, again, we can go down that topic if you want to. I love talking about free will and the debates, the arguments for and against it. But from my view, God gives people the free will to position their hearts towards or away from him. And when they're positioned towards him, he is inclined to give them subjective experiences that can overwhelm them and bring them to loyalty. Is there anything I quite missed in what you said that I have yet to address?
Well, I'll say no, because I think what you did just there is, it's kind of a vague waving away. So you're like, you don't think the Bible is correct in all things. Cool. I don't know how we tell which things it's correct about and which ones we don't. That seems to be sort of like a cherry picking of convenience. But it also doesn't, you say there's a number of ways around the problem. I don't know that any of those ways get around the problem of why would a God allow a book to repeatedly misrepresent him, resulting in immorality and death without a clear correction, death and slavery without a clear correction. When you say that, why is God selective about who he's going to allow to have the experiences? And it's based on this notion of free will. And it's about who is already inclined or leaning that direction. That's an exhausting hand waving that doesn't remotely explain how, when I was already a sincere believer who thought that God wanted me to be in ministry, and I'm on my knees crying and begging for God to help me to do what I'm convinced at the time he wants me to do. I don't know how anybody, I can't say, okay, there might have been something wrong, something that I wasn't open to, somebody, but if I'm begging God to address that and I get nothing back, and all the people who are telling me, oh, there must have been some secret sin or some secret blockage or God gave me whatever, those are all excuses that they have no evidence for at all. And it seems like just a post hoc rationalization for why they can be convinced, but they need a way to explain why I wasn't convinced. Why didn't God reveal himself to me? And it's not just me, though. It's all the people who are in the clergy project, and it's countless non-believers out there. And I guess the thing is, do you think there is such a thing as non-resistant non-belief? Because if so, that seems to contradict your view that, or maybe your view is it's not just being non-resistant. You have to be eagerly looking for it. But now we're back to people who are eagerly looking for a God are going to find one and convince themselves, including of all the other gods that don't exist if one does.
Okay, so I largely agree with a lot of what you said, and I want to be very careful because I don't want to ever speak to your personal experience or anyone else's specifically. I know I've been here speaking generally about subjective experiences, but when it comes to your own either in the past or now, or promises or anyone else's, I don't want to ever say it was because of X, Y, Z that God didn't reveal himself to you. I think that can lead to a lot of potential blaming on somebody, either in their
Hey, Jack.
Individual doctrine. Or,
Jack.
sorry? Yes.
Please, at least with us, do me a favor and skip the I don't want to be offensive disclaimer thing. What I'm looking for is how can you or me or anyone else tell the difference between what seems to be your post hoc justification for how God works from I'm just making stuff up about how God works. Is there some way that we can use to tell the difference between whether or not your suppositions about God are real or rationalizations?
I don't think we can test it empirically. And I don't know if that's perhaps exactly what you're asking, but I think it becomes difficult to test how hypothetically God would work when we're sitting from our perspective. I don't think we're even able to do that. When it comes to cherry picking the Bible, I think when I was saying there are ways around problems like potential condoning of slavery in the Old Testament, I just mean that there are reasons that we might possibly be misunderstanding it when we read it now. That God didn't, when he was, perhaps overseeing the creation of the Bible, when he was doing that, he wasn't mistaken, but that perhaps we're mistaken in our way of reading it. Now, when it comes to differentiating, yes?
Oh, I was just going to say, if what you're saying is there's no way to tell if this is an untestable claim, as far as I can tell, untestable claims are useless.
It's an untestable external claim. The problem with divine hiddenness is one of internal consistency or inconsistency. I'm not trying to build a case from the ground up that God is like this or God does X, Y, Z.
No. The divine hiddenness is about, I mean, if you want to, in a nutshell, it's, hey, we would expect this if this particular God existed. And if you want to say, your expectations are flawed, that's fine, but you'd have to show what the justification is for why some other set of expectations are correct. And if you have no testable way to demonstrate what the expectations should be, then you can make any claim you want, and they're all on equal footing. They're all on similar sand being washed away. I need a way to say, given the God that I believe in, here's the testable way to reach expectations. Because until you do that, you don't have a claim that we can even evaluate.
So my view of Christianity and God is one that consists of God compelling people to believe in him, sometimes through a combination of experience and empirical evidence, but oftentimes just pushing them by experience. And so taking a step back from Christianity or even from theism, when I look at the world, that is how I see that people turn to God and turn to belief in a higher power. Are you asking again why this kind of experiential evidence should convince somebody and how we can know that it should convince somebody?
In part, but you're describing how you view the world. You're not doing anything to tell us why that should be the correct way to view the world. And that's the only thing I care about. Like, if not, and this is, not to slag you off or anything, but every Yahoo that calls in with any belief that is ultimately untestable, that does not have a framework that we can evaluate. I mean, I don't put you in the same category necessarily as the loon who feels that there are pixies in the garden that are doing rain chants and causing it to rain in Mongolia when they live in Philadelphia. But that claim is similarly untestable to yours. And so if I'm going to, if the whole point here is to say, we have good reason to think there is a God and that we can understand how that God works, and then we can demonstrate that we're seeing things that are consistent with that. I don't know how you do that with How do I tell the difference between your claims about God and anybody else's claims about anything if they're all untestable?
So, right. So I am making untestable claims. I agree with you on that. However, I want to reiterate that I'm not building a case for my worldview from the ground up. This is not an attempt to try and persuade you or promise or anyone listening now that they should believe in God or that they should even believe that God acts this way. What I'm doing is I'm offering a reasonable justification from my point of view that this is how God works. And
you're not. You don't get, I'm not going to, there's no offense to you, Jack. You're my favorite caller of the year, and I'm enjoying the conversation. But if you're going to be, oh, I'm not trying to convince you, then you've called the wrong show. And if you think that you're making a reasonable case when you're presenting something that is untestable, then you don't know what reasonable means. It's not reasonable for you to believe and to advocate for an untestable position. I can come up with any number of untestable positions and say they're reasonable, but that's not how reason works.
So again, I want to be very clear. I didn't say I'm not trying to convince you or promise. I said I'm not trying to convince you or promise that God exists or that God works in this way. I'm trying to make the case for an internal consistency within my Christian view.
I don't give a shit about internal consistency. Any piece of science fiction, the best pieces of science fiction are internally consistent. It's when the science fiction breaks that internal consistency that we are no longer able to suspend our disbelief, and we're like, that's bullshit. They completely changed the rules for how magic works in this. But as long as you have a fairly simple system, internal consistency is irrelevant to whether or not it's true in the reality we experience. And all I care about, I don't care about fictions that are internally consistent. I care about claims and whether or not they're true in reality.
Yeah, and I think I get it. I get what I remember from the other call, like what your goal is in this conversation, and attempting to kind of explain this thing. But like Matt said, it sounds like saying like, yeah, but this thing in this book makes sense because of this. It's a justification for something that we're not even interested in if the character itself that you're trying to, make seem reasonable, if we don't even have reason to think they exist, And so, but here's my problem. I don't think you've even made it like my issue with the whole loyalty thing, and why wouldn't a God just, if a God knows if somebody's going to be convinced or not, why wouldn't a God just let everybody be convinced? Or why is he creating people that can't be convinced? There's a lot that we didn't even get into on that. So for me, I don't feel that it was a reasonable explanation for the internal discrepancy, nor was there, which you said that wasn't your goal. There also wasn't a case for any of it being true, much less making sense, even just as a false story. But I am, oh, go ahead, Matt.
Oh, I'm sorry. You finish. I've talked a lot.
I was just going to say, Jack, again, you're a great caller. I would really love to have an entire conversation just about free will. And you said that you liked that. So again, sorry to tell you to call back another time, but, because Matt might have more to say on this call, but just in general, if you'd ever like to call back when I'm hosting and talk about free will specifically, I think we could have a really cool conversation about that. That would go into a different direction than where this one went. But I would love to have that.
That's pretty much what I was going to say, because we have like 4 other callers that are theists who are on hold who may have a different view than you. So let's just plan to have a discussion another time about free will or something else, or, something along those lines. But let's stick a fork in it for today. We'll all think about it some more, and we'll get some other callers in.
Does that sound all right with you,
all right,
Jack?
I appreciate your time. Is there an email that I can reach out to either of you by to perhaps get more information?
I can give you my email address. It's public. I can't promise to ever reply to it. I have tens of thousands of emails that never get replied, but mine is sans.deity, sans.deity @gmail.com.
And mine is
All right.
Eve was framed. Mine is evewasframed.contact@gmail.com.
All right. Thank you both. I appreciate that. And thank you again for letting me take up so much of your time.
Thanks,
no problem.
Jack.
Thanks,
Have
Jack.
a good Bye. Let me just say
Okay.
that's a 40-minute call. I don't ever want to hear people complain that we don't let people talk or that we don't have conversations or that we get mad at everybody or I mean, somebody was actually honest and engaged in the conversation with us, and
There was even if not every question or issue was addressed, and even sometimes when we're talking past each other, there was never a moment where I felt that there was anything other than an honest attempt to actually address the subject we were talking about, even when we, move from subject to subject. Let's see if we
if
can do
any
more of that.
yeah, if anything, I feel like that conversation went as close to some of these real life person to person across a dinner table conversations that I have, which is my favorite kind. So, okay, do you have any preference on who we talk to next, or should we just Oh, wait. Did you want to talk to that one first?
Sure.
Okay. This is your thing.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, you are live on the Sunday show with Promise and Matt. What are you calling in for today?
Hey, Chris.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah, you're live, Chris.
How can you mute this? I can Hello?
Hello,
Hello?
Chris. You're live. What was your call about?
Hello? Can you hear me?
I knew this
Okay.
was a troll. I muted this person.
Yeah. Say
We can
goodbye
ban
to
that
Chris.
number.
Yeah, we're going to ban your number, Chris. Chris was calling to suggest that their theory is that Donald Trump is the reincarnation of Hitler. I decided to go ahead and engage it to see if I could have, my quick thing was going to be, how do you test this claim? Because in order to be consistent, I was going to point out that if you don't have a way to test it, I don't care. I don't care if you think Trump, and also I was going to ask, where was Hitler for the 13-ish months between when he died and when he was reincarnated as Donald Trump?
That would have been a fun thing to hear an answer for.
Yeah. What a shame that you
man.
had to just be a troll from the second we went live.
Ruining
Weird.
all the
All
good
right.
vibes from that
Pick
other
a good
call.
caller.
I've got a better feeling about this one. This one is Jeremiah calling in. Jeremiah, you are live on the Sunday show with Promise and Matt. What were you calling in about today? Jeremiah?
Oh, my apologies.
All
I
right.
muted because the last troll caller. So
Oh.
let's try that
Okay.
again. So
That's
sorry.
our bad,
Yes.
Jeremiah. We'll try again.
Hey,
Can
Jeremiah,
you hear
you
me
are
okay?
live on the line. Yes. What were you calling in for today?
Hey, good to be here. It's good listening to you guys. I just saw Are We Going to Hell? And I thought, well, who knows? Who knows what these two will think by the time they come to the end of their lives?
Okay, so what would determine if we are going to hell or not? If I die tomorrow, how do you know if I'm going to hell or to heaven?
Well, I think it
And are
would
those are the
largely
only
determine
options?
upon. Right. I think it would largely depend upon your acceptance of certain historical truths rooted in the Bible.
Can you share what you think those are?
And why they determine our
Well, I
Right.
think that you're
disposition after
probably
death.
familiar with standard Christian doctrine. I didn't write it or decide what the criteria are, but
There's
I don't think we
there's
need
a
to go
lot of
over,
people
what.
there's a ton of people listening right now. So I wouldn't handle this conversation based off of assumptions about myself or Matt. I would more handle it as just answering the questions.
Well, yeah, accepting the basic truths in the Bible, the basic historical fact that Christ died for our sins, was persecuted for us, and raised again, and now has a massive following of people who attest to his lordship based on those facts.
So while I don't accept that those are truths, let's assume for a second that I accepted that the story is true, that, Jesus lived and died, believing and intending that it was going to serve as a substitutionary atonement. What reason do I have to believe that that's actually what determines my disposition after death? And what if it's not like I get to choose what I believe. I'm either convinced or not. I'm not convinced that there's an afterlife or a soul or anything else. I'm convinced that this is a story. What should compel me to believe that this is the correct story of what happens after I die?
Well, you had kind of two questions there. I would think, the whole raising from the dead part and having
I
lots
have
of
no reason to
witnesses,
believe that he was raised from the
unprecedented
dead.
historical documents. Well, right.
I have no
There's
reason
as
to
much
believe that he was
reason to
raised
believe
from the
that he
dead.
was raised for the dead as there's reason to believe in many other historical truths.
I'm sorry. I don't have any reason to believe he was raised from the dead. What reason can you provide that we should believe he was raised from the dead?
The historical documentation, the level.
There is no historical documentation
of
of Jesus. There is no historical documentation of Jesus being raised from the dead. What evidence do you have?
Well, there are firsthand witness accounts to his birth,
No, there are
death,
not.
resurrection.
Jeremiah,
No, there's
there are
not.
no firsthand
not of his birth. You're right. I don't think there are.
No, Jeremiah.
Those would not.
No, Jeremiah.
There are of his
Jeremiah.
life, death, and resurrection.
Jeremiah, can you hear me? There are no firsthand witness accounts of anything. The Gospels are not firsthand accounts. They're not eyewitness accounts. You have no way to investigate them, even if they were, to demonstrate that's true. You're saying this is a historically documented. You're saying that his resurrection is historically documented, and that is simply not true.
The level of documentation exceeds that of other historical facts from that time period.
No, it doesn't, Jeremiah. No, so here's the thing, Jeremiah. No, it doesn't. I'm having difficulty believing that you're for real, because you're just asserting things that we already know and that good Christian scholars also already acknowledge are just the case. But let me bend over backwards and say, let's assume that the gospel narratives were written by eyewitnesses and that they do in fact serve as historical documentation that Jesus was died and came back to life. What evidence do you have? Even if I bend over backwards and give you all of that, which is simply not true, that the reason he came back to life is because he was divine and served as a substitutionary atonement for our sins that determines our disposition in an afterlife.
So then I think that you come to other questions, right? You would certainly lend more credence to the story if you were there and saw Christ resurrected. Of course.
Okay, Jeremiah,
right?
This is cartoonishly stupid, and you're not answering. What question do you think I just asked you?
You just asked me what reason there is to think he's correct just because he rose from the dead.
Yes. And your answer was that if I had been there. Well, I wasn't, and
yes,
that is not
reaffirming what I was affirming what you said, and I was about to go into exactly what that
When
was.
I ask you for a reason, you don't need to come up with fantasies about if I were there. I wasn't there. And if I were there, I don't necessarily know that my interpretation of an experience is an accurate one. That's monumentally arrogant in presumption. So when I ask you, what evidence do you have, even if I grant that he rose from the dead, that this was because he was divine and served as a pathway for our salvation, I need you to present the evidence for that.
The evidence for that, and this really goes into historical analysis, right? There are many things that you accept as historical facts.
Okay, I'm going to mute Jeremiah, and I'm going to mute you, Jeremiah, and I need you to listen for a second, because there's nobody on the planet who should take you seriously right now. You've already done, I've bent over backwards, and all I've done is ask you what evidence you could provide. You immediately went to, there's historical blah, blah, blah. No. First of all, there's no historical evidence that could ever justify believing a supernatural claim. That's not what historical evidence is, and that's not how it works. And then you used, instead of providing actual evidence, you used the comical, frequent buzzword of multiple. So I don't need to hear about multiple, various, many. Just provide actual bits of evidence. If you don't have any, acknowledge it. If you don't know what evidence is, which seems to be the case, acknowledge that. But I'm not going to allow a conversation to go forward with you asserting, well, there's historical evidence that multiples and minis, and it does this and that. All it does is demonstrate that you either don't know, don't understand, or don't care to know or understand what counts as evidence. So I'm going to stop all of this and I'm going to ask a different question to make it as easy as possible. What method can you provide? What test method can you provide that could possibly confirm any supernatural causation? Once again, what test method can you provide that could possibly confirm any supernatural causation? Here we go.
None.
Okay. And so if there is no test methodology that you can provide, then you have no way to appeal to supernatural causation that would be rationally justified, correct?
I don't see any other historical documents that are well supported.
I'm sorry, I didn't ask a thing about
Please
historical
answer the
documents.
question.
Promise?
I don't have, if he can't answer your very basic question, so I don't know that we're going to be able to get anywhere either. I can try to ask it a different way, but
the thing was just where you guys will end up before you die. Someday you may not hold the same beliefs that you have. That frequently happens as people get older. They change their perspective on things.
And what happened, Jeremiah, is that I used to believe all of this
again
for 25 years, and I have already proven that I am absolutely willing to change my mind to the point that I lose pretty much everything in my life, have to start completely over again. It's not easy. It was not the easy thing to do. And yet I changed my mind when presented better information because I have integrity. So I've already proven my ability to do that. And here I am on this show, willing to change my mind. Anytime somebody gives good reason, there would be a lot of people holding me accountable to that too, because everybody can watch this. I'm not doing it in secret. I'm not, you have the chance right now to offer up some information, but Matt just asked you a question. You haven't answered it. Let me ask it like this. If the Bible went away, if we lost it, if we lost all the information, all the stories, and you have these people on earth and somebody says, hey, you're going to hell tomorrow. What is the evidence? What could that person point to and say, this is how you can know that you're going to hell tomorrow?
You'd have to look through other historical facts or other.
Nope, we don't have any books, Jeremiah. In this example, there are no books.
Yes,
there are no books.
That's exactly what I think you kind of believe, that we have no history to look
Jeremiah, if you can't answer anything, then I don't want to talk to you.
Jeremiah is not serious and not deserving of further conversation. I'm not going to hang up on you just yet, Jeremiah, because I need you to understand this. History doesn't demonstrate truths about empirical reality. History is a compilation of stories and claims, and they are supported by external evidence, or they are not. The way you tell whether or not Paul Bunyan was real versus, King Arthur or George Washington or anybody who you aren't able to experience directly, et cetera, is through an amalgamation of reports from competing sources and about whether or not the claims in those stories are consistent with the accepted, demonstrable facts of reality. As you acknowledged, not only do you not have any sort of test methodology that you can present to show supernatural causation, I'm not aware of any methodology to demonstrate supernatural causation or the existence of anything supernatural, whether it can cause anything or not. It is an untestable claim, as far as we can tell. And so you keep going back to historical. It's not that we don't think we have any history. It's that we understand that historical claims don't confirm magic, and they also don't confirm facts about the way the physical universe works. That's the realm of science. Science is the process that leads to knowledge and understanding. And so history doesn't teach us anything about chemistry. History doesn't teach us anything about physics. Yes, those things took place in the past, but we're not just chronicling stories. When you look at something like the Bible that tries to present the creation myth, it gets the order of events wrong. It gets physical facts about reality wrong. There is no firmament. The earth did not exist prior to the sun. These are scientific facts that are constructed through data and presentation. Nobody was there that it's not like scientists nowadays who are extrapolating physics and chemistry and looking at, for example, the accretion disk of a sun that is forming through gravitational forces and how that constructs the planets and how different stellar bodies interact with each other through curved space-time and merge due to gravity. We can extract these things, and we can extrapolate backwards and mathematically consistent to show what was happening in the universe. We can go back and know when there were eclipses, and we can make predictions about eclipses in the future. We can know a great deal of things because the science tells us about the physical facts of our past. You're trying to look at stories about people that you have no way to investigate and about magic that you have no way to investigate, and try to pretend that Promise and I are somehow in denial that we have history. No. I'm not a huge fan of studying history, other than to the extent of let's avoid repeating it. But I'm willing to accept that there was probably an itinerant rabbi named Jesus. I don't necessarily know that there's good enough reason to think there was actually a Moses. I think there's even less reason to think that there was a literal Adam and Eve, and certainly the metaphoric mitochondrial Eve that science references is not the Eve of the Bible. It's just our most recent common ancestor. And so you seem to be conflating the extrapolations we can do through good empirical evidence and science to tell us about our history, and then pretending that stories about our history are reliable. There's stories about Elvis, I don't believe. There's stories about George Washington, I don't believe.
Yep.
There are narratives coming out now about things that are happening right now all around the world, especially in places of war, that I don't believe. There is no way in hell that the story of a magical being impregnating a virgin to take human form, to serve as a blood sacrifice for blood magic to himself for rules that he's in charge of, to act as a sort of substitutionary atonement for sins, a concept that I reject, in order to determine our disposition in an afterlife that we have no good reason to believe is true and plenty of reason to believe is false. There's no room in the human psyche for what religions would refer to as a soul. Everything about what makes me me is a malleable, identifiable construct, product of my brain. The mind is what the brain does, my likes, my preferences, my memories, my desires. And also, doxastic volunteerism is apparently false. I can't just merely choose to believe something. So when you keep talking about, the historical evidence, none of what you're citing could possibly justify the conclusions you're reaching. And I'd bend over backwards to grant you everything and say, hey, let's assume that the stories are telling a base truth, and there was this person who was killed and actually resurrected. What conclusion can we draw off that? And you can't even be calm and respectful enough to say, if that's the case, then here are the reasonable conclusions from that. Instead, when we ask you, what's the test methodology? None. What can you conclude? Well, you guys are just denying history. You're providing like the preschool and kindergarten level assertions that apologists make that are either demonstrably false or not demonstrably true. So I tried to move off of that to just say, how can you demonstrate supernatural causation, which evidently you acknowledge you can't. So I'm going to ask you this. Apart from believing the story that you believe, we're going to reformat Promise's question. How can Promise and myself be rationally justified that we are currently destined to a hell or an undesirable afterlife? That's the question.
Can you explain that a little bit? I don't exactly understand the question. I'm happy to engage more frankly or in a more open-ended way if you'd like. I'm not trying to steamroll you. I really do believe in the historical basis of the Bible, and I'd like to just engage on what it would mean. Like you said, if that were true, I think it would largely mean that we can expect people who are doing amazing things.
I'm sorry. The what I'm here
poorly.
question, Jeremiah. The question, Jeremiah, is how can Promise and I be rationally justified in believing that we are going to any afterlife? I'll make it that easy.
Well, it would depend on what you believe, right?
No, it doesn't.
You're asking how.
I'm sorry.
I don't really exactly understand what you're asking me to
if I know that you don't understand, so I'm going to try and help you. Jeremiah, is there a rational justification to believe that people go to an afterlife? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay. What is the rational justification for believing that people go to an afterlife?
There's extraordinary evidence in the historical record.
Goodbye, Jeremiah.
Oh my God.
Say goodbye.
You don't want
Jeremiah,
to
say goodbye.
That's fine with me.
Jeremiah, you're not having
Jeremiah.
a conversation. You're just repeating the same thing over and over again, claiming that we don't care about history. But history doesn't claim that George Washington existed and was our president, and then he died. If you interrupt me, I will drop the call immediately because you managed to
muted Jeremiah. Jeremiah's not going to get to speak again unless Promise decides that she wants to hear from Jeremiah, because I think Jeremiah is full of shit. You do not come back with there's extraordinary evidence in the history record. I'm not an idiot, Jeremiah. I've been doing this for 20 fucking years, and I just explained to you the problem with citing the history. And I didn't use the term extraordinary evidence, but you know who would? Somebody who's heard people talk about extraordinary evidence for extraordinary claims and is, instead of actually engaging in an honest conversation, just trying to fucking troll us because he thinks we're stupid. Well, we're not stupid. I'm smarter than you on this subject and the game that you're playing. Not about everything. I don't know you, but about this game that you're playing of all the extraordinary evidence and historical. I've done this for a long fucking time. I see you coming from 12 miles away. Promise will decide whether or not you get to speak again. You better hope she's in a good mood.
I could be in a really great mood and I still probably might not want to hear from, but we'll see. So here's my thing. The claim isn't that George Washington existed and was our president. And, you know, we're doubting history. You're basically making the claim George Washington existed. He was our president. He died. He rose again, and he still exists to this day. I'm sorry. I would not believe that claim. I don't believe there's already, like Matt said, there's so many. I don't believe the cherry tree story about George Washington. So there's a lot of things about history that we have to look at what we actually have evidence for, and yet you keep citing, well, history says over and over and over again. So my question for you is, what is your evidence that right now hell exists?
Oh, I'll unmute him.
I thought I did. Okay, so Jeremiah, what was my question for you?
You asked me what is the evidence that hell exists.
Yes.
Am I allowed to cite historical evidence or no? Are we in a
Is that your only
world?
Jeremiah, is that really all you have? Is there anything?
It is truly the only reason that I believe.
Then you're stupid.
And that's sad for you. That's really sad, Jeremiah. I do think that what's happened is you've memorized.
No, we can't have a conversation about it.
From talking.
No, I'm going to prevent you from talking forever. When I say you're stupid, I don't mean that you're unintelligent. I mean that you're either stupid in the sense that you think historical evidence can confirm the supernatural and an afterlife, which is absolutely irrational and stupid, or you're stupid because you think we're stupid enough to buy you saying the word historical one more fucking time. There is nothing about reports. All history is reports of things. There is no evidence of a hell. There's barely evidence of people being convinced there's a hell. And soteriology and what sort of afterlife you end up going to is an incredibly complicated field, even within Christianity. But you either don't know that or don't care. There is no way to demonstrate by your own admission anything supernatural, hell being supernatural. There's no way that old stories can demonstrate or be considered evidence that hell is real. I am disinterested in you, in your constant appeals to history. You might as well be saying, I have a book that talks about this. The book is not the evidence. The book is the claim. The book is a collection of the claims. These are stories about what some people say is true, what some people may believe is true, and what Promise was asking for, and don't worry, you're not going to get back on to speak about it today or maybe ever, was what is the evidence to support the claims? And instead, you're talking about historical evidence, but you don't even have historical evidence because there aren't historians ever in the history of the world chronicling facts about a hell. This isn't history. This is a blend of claims about history and claims about other worlds that are not demonstrated. It is beyond absurd for you to try to pretend that this fantasy book is history. And it doesn't go out of the realm of fantasy and become history on things like hell until you demonstrate it. It's exactly the same as pointing to Spider-Man comics and saying because they point to New York, that therefore Doc Ock is a real person that we should worry about. It is irrational. It is a violation of foundational logical principles. It is unsound epistemology, and it is cartoonishly bad apologetics. And I saw this coming from 43 miles away. So goodbye, Jeremiah.
Citing history as your only reason for believing something that you believe presently exists, that doesn't make any sense. If something presently exists, you should have present evidence for it, not just, well, here's some books that, because this is like, I think it was a book originally, the Abraham Lincoln, the Vampire Slayer. Like, should we believe that? I mean, it sounds cool, but it's not, that's it. But to me, what it sounds like is that this is a person who has memorized a bunch of apologetics because they're convinced because of personal reasons, and they don't know how to cite any of that. And he called in thinking that it was some groundbreaking news to say, don't you think there's a chance you might change your mind before you die? People change their mind before they die. Like, this is something that we have never thought of before in our lives. But
I need to sneak. You've got Call-In Studio, right?
I do.
I need to sneak away for like 2 minutes for a quick emergency. Everybody will love that because when you demolish the next Jeremiah even faster and more efficiently than I did,
it'll be slower.
I'm gone. It'll be awesome. No, it'll be fine. I'll be back in like 2 minutes, but
okay. Sounds good. All right, guys, let's see who we're gonna chat with next. I'm gonna cheat and take an easy call real quick. I'm gonna talk to Matthew.
Hello?
Hey, Matthew, you are live on the Sunday show. With Promise, Matt might be back during our call, but you're stuck with me for a moment. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. What did you call in for today?
Hi. Okay. I'm not rehearsed, so pardon me.
Me either.
Haha. Okay. So I like when I was in my 20s, I feel like I was more like lively and effervescent, more social. And I've lived like an agnostic life, like since my adulthood. I'm in my 30s now, and I'm not as vibrant as I used to be. And I don't go out socially as much anymore. And not that I question that I'm on the right path, but I don't feel like fulfilled. And I guess I'm asking, like, is that lack of fulfillment like analogous to an agnostic life, or do I have to? Let me not have the or. You know, is that like, I don't know what I should be doing? Is that echo in my head analogous to living a life without theism, or is it no or?
Well, do you feel like, so let me ask you this. Do you believe that a God exists, or do you not believe that a God exists?
I like, if I had to pick, I would say no. But
Okay.
I would rather
So
say
you're
until I
not
receive more empirical evidence. Yeah, I don't
but you're not
confidently say. Pardon.
you're not convinced that a God exists, though, correct?
Correct. I'm not a theist. Correct.
Cool. Okay. To me, that makes you an atheist, but we don't have to get into
Okay.
that conversation. I'd
That's fine.
rather stick to what
When
you were talking
when
about.
I was younger, I'm sorry for interrupting. When I was younger, I confidently said I was. Confidently. Like, I would even debate. I would say, like, that's silly,
Were you
that's a
ever,
figment of imagination,
but when you
etc.
were
Mhm.
feeling, so you are describing yourself now in a place where you're feeling like you've lost your path and all of that, you've lost
Mhm.
vibrancy or whatever, and you're trying to figure out if this is
Right.
related to your lack of belief. But
Right.
so at one point, were you a believer and you felt like you did have these things?
I wouldn't go that far. No. I was raised. My mother's Shinto Buddhist. My dad was Roman Catholic. So when they had children, they decided not to raise us with religion. And I really appreciated that.
Okay, so yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm getting it now. Okay, so you're curious if maybe you're missing out on like is this thing like maybe behind this door that I haven't really
Mhm.
opened before? Is that what you're getting
Right.
at? Okay, so I
Partly,
would say,
maybe, yeah. Yeah, let's say that. Yeah.
yeah, I would say I think it would be really helpful for you to go. I actually had to read a bunch of studies on this when I was writing my book last year, because I wrote a chapter in
Mhm.
there about finding meaning and purpose and all of that outside of religion as an atheist.
Mhm.
And I read a lot of studies on what it is that actually gives people a sense of meaning and purpose and this vibrancy and
Mhm.
this hope for life and joy and all of that. And
Mhm.
that helped me a lot. Unfortunately, it didn't help me to communicate it like in 2 minutes on a phone call. But
Of
if you
course.
go look up, if you're the kind of person that likes to learn more, I would go read about those studies, because it's things like having good community. It's things like family that is having shared values with you. It is things like stability in life. And some of these things are within our control, and a lot of them are not. So it's about kind
Mhm.
of what's the word I'm looking for here? Optimizing the things that you can change in
Mhm.
life. And I think what you'll
Mhm.
find is you can go look and see, okay, what is it that religious people are finding is giving them meaning? None of it is actually religion.
Mhm.
It happens to be providing some of the stuff that we all have, not all, that a lot of the stuff that we have access to or can find in life. And I don't think that
Mhm.
you are going to find any of those answers behind the door of religion. I think you are going to find the answers to that stuff by just learning more about humans and how we function and what makes us happy and healthy and all of that. And a lot of it is way less exciting than we think. It's really more
Mhm.
about little mundane everyday things. Um, and things like depression, anxiety, all of that can disrupt it, which is why I also highly recommend um, looking into the Secular Therapy Project. They are incredible, looking into recovering from religion, all of that.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. Could I ask
But
one more?
yeah, please.
I apologize. Thank you so much. Um, okay, like, so would you say that, to reiterate, like, would you say that like, hope is not, we should be hopeful people? Like, or like, do you know what I
No,
mean?
because
Like,
I don't
should
even.
we?
No, I
Yeah.
don't know what that word means. When people use that word,
Same.
I think they,
Same.
yeah.
Mhm.
So
And
so
yeah.
when I use the word hope, to me, it's more just like this very vague abstract term of like feeling maybe positive about the future. And I have learned that that's not a valuable term for me because I don't know that I feel
Right.
positive about the future. I have OCD
Correct.
also. So if I start getting hung up and fixated on what's going to happen, and if I can predict if it's going to be something I deem as good or bad, then it's going to go ahead and ruin it for me anyways. So
Right.
I have learned that to me, actually, I'm wanting to focus more on being present and finding joy in little moments and not worrying so much
Correct.
about this elusive hope. I think it's great to have things to look forward to. I think it's great to to have stuff like that, but I think a lot of the issue comes in when people are like, well, we have to find hope and meaning and purpose, and there's so much weight put on these ideas that it's like when people say, oh, there's a missing God hole in your heart and that's why you feel this way. I think we latch on to negative feelings, and the world says, oh, you should have hope and meaning and whatever instead to fill it, and we project onto it what that's supposed to mean. You get to create it for
Okay.
yourself. You get to decide, is hope something you want in your life?
Right.
Great. Figure out what that means, and is meaning something you want in your life? Great. I think it's more about finding some level of acceptance and feeling like you have what you need in life to have positive moments throughout the day.
I can respect that. I can eat that. I can understand that. I guess I'm left with like, would you then say it's the trial, quote unquote, for the atheist to cope without hope and to live within the true real isms, or
No.
or how do we live positively and vibrantly, and how do we look forward to the next day without the relationship with hope? I don't
think that's an atheist thing, because I actually struggled way more with that as a Christian than I do now. Again, I think it's more about like doing away with a lot of the pressure surrounding those terms. I know plenty of atheists that are like super hopeful and some that are not. And I know some that are nihilistic in a really negative way and some that are nihilistic in the most freeing, happy way. So I think it's about not turning to agnosticism or atheism or whatever you want to call it as an answer for anything. You have to figure out what philosophies work for your life, what activities work for your life, what hobbies, what people you want around you. I think what happens is religious people get kind of a pass on so many of those things because often in organized religion, you're just handed a community, you're handed access to certain things, you're given childcare in some circumstances, you're told your purpose is to follow God or whatever it is. And it kind of gives people permission to check off the idea of meaning and purpose because they can say, well, I'm doing it because I'm following God. And they never even have to evaluate, wait, am I actually feeling fulfilled in life? Do I actually feel like I have meaning in life? They just check it off and say, yes, I do. So I think what you can do as a non-believer is say, do I care if I feel like I have this thing called purpose and meaning? What does that even mean for me? And look into other people's philosophies, figure out where you stand on it. But it is a process, and it isn't something that any human, I think, gets to be lazy about. You can pretend that your religion has given it to you. I think a lot of people end up stumbling into problems with that anyways. I know I did when I was religious, but I think it's just about, as a human, if that matters to you, then you have to go on that journey and figure out what you want to make out of your life. But I do think a big part is not letting it carry so much weight. I think society has pushed this idea via like gurus who are like, I guess I won't name names, but these like big dudes with the stages and the books of the 5 ways to find meaning, and they market it. It is like they've capitalized on this idea that like sometimes people suffer from depression or loneliness or anxiety, and let's tell them that there's this thing called meaning or purpose, and we'll help them that way.
Should I? Okay, so the journey is an individual one, and every individual has to go through it in their individual way. So there's no like, so I have to find my way. Is that what you're saying?
Sure. I mean, people can oftentimes agree on stuff, but it's not like, I'm not saying that is just a fact. Like everybody is living their own life. That is how life is. Even Christians, religious people are on their very own unique journeys, and you'll find that most of them don't even agree on all things. So we are each like, this is your individual journey, and yeah.
So, like, how do you have any like advice or suggestions to how I pursue that without feeling depressed or heavy or lost?
Matthew?
Yes,
Professional
sir.
therapy,
Yes, sir.
for sure.
Okay, therapy. So you think it is a mental thing? It's not me being lost. You think it is actually I should seek counseling more than anything. You think it's a low self-affect? And
I don't know what it
Matthew-
is for you. I think a professional would have to help you figure that out.
Okay.
But I
okay,
think things related to the mind like this, the first thing I do is try to find an expert on it. So, but I'm going to let Matt answer now.
I appreciate your input. Thank you so much. Thank you. Hi, sir.
Hey, first of all, thanks, and I'm sorry. I can't help, and maybe this will feel or sound mean, or maybe it'll be insightful, but I can't help but thinking how absurd it is to ask someone else how to become an individual.
Not that. I mean, I didn't mean to sound so obtuse. Okay. I've lived
like
my life, but I like.
It's like you're saying, I need to find.
I'm
So
not
you're
as
saying I need
vibrant
to
as I
find
was.
my own way. How do I do that?
Yeah, like I'm not vibrant as I was. Like I would go out more in my 20s. Like.
Me too.
Like I would socialize. I wouldn't say no to engagement. And
Me too.
And not that I. Yeah. Okay. I
Things change.
Okay.
Cut yourself some
that's
slack. Cut yourself some slack. Reach out to like the psychotherapy project. See if there's some expert counseling or whatever else. But we're not an advice network. We're not gurus. I was gonna let Promise deal with all of it, and then there was just this moment where it sounded like, and just to paraphrase, you're like, oh, so what you're saying is I need to be an individual. Can you tell me how to do that? And I was like, I get it. I feel that frustration. It's visceral. I think you're kind of floundering, and I think Promise is right that you might benefit from some professional help, but that's not us.
No,
yeah, if I had a friend come to me and say, "Hey, look, I used to be like this. I am now not. I want to go back to how I was." The first thing I would tell that friend is, "Awesome, let's get you some help. Let's sit down and talk to an expert on this, because this is sounding like, it's something beyond my ability to help you as an average person." And so I would absolutely encourage you to talk to a professional, and they might be like, "No, you're doing great. You're just feeling like what everybody else feels at this age, and here's some tools
or maybe
to help
there's
you."
a problem. Yeah. I appreciate you both. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Matthew. Good luck with all of that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so
Take
much.
care.
Yep.
Bye-bye. Sorry, I cheated and I took a agnostic caller because I wanted to
That's
save the
all right.
theists for when you're hanging out.
Those are the calls that I am absolutely the worst about. And I like you saw me chatting behind. I genuinely feel bad that I'm not better at that, but I'm not. Who knows? It's maybe my brain, my broken psyche, maybe it's whatever. It's just, I wish Matthew well. Get some help, cut yourself some slack. Stop thinking that other people have the answers and have solved the problems that you're struggling with, because like, I don't go out as much as I used to. I don't have, and yet my life is just generally better. I think it's a lot of it has to do with kind of getting comfortable in your own skin and figuring out, what you want your life to be like.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I appreciate the vote of confidence in thinking that either you or I are people that should ever give advice about other people's lives, but we're good at taking callers on here, and that's at least the extent of my what I can offer. So let's get back to doing that. Did you care which caller we go with next? I
Oddly
wanted to talk
enough,
to, yeah, go ahead.
who were you gonna say?
Caller 7 or 20, depending on your,
Sure.
you tell me. Or did you want to
No,
talk
no,
to, I'm seeing
that's
number
fine.
2. Okay. Let's talk to Johnny. Hello, Johnny. You are live on the Sunday show with Promise and Matt.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good. It says here that you think that there's a way to prove hell exists.
Well, I do think there is. I think that there can be some tests, but before I really get into that, I wanted to ask you guys a couple questions. Matt, I'm a long time watcher.
No.
I've watched a lot of your content and your debate, but
No.
Promise, I'm pretty hello?
Yeah,
Did you
so
say something, Matt? Or
Johnny, I probably shouldn't. But if you're calling in to say
Okay.
that you think there's a way to prove hell, nothing about my life or Promise's life or any question you could
Right.
ask us could possibly be relevant to that.
Well, what makes you
yeah,
say
I
that?
don't. So Johnny, I'll explain real
Because
quick. I don't mind.
hell either exists or it doesn't, independent of anything that's happened in my life or Promise's life. And the method by
Right.
which one would demonstrate the truth of a proposition is completely independent of my life and Promise's life. That's why I say that.
Yeah, and
Well,
Johnny,
sure,
there's a
but don't you
lot
think
of
worldview is important?
Johnny,
Okay,
there's a lot
Johnny's
of people
not serious.
listening. Yeah, there's a lot of people listening, and I don't mind answering little questions about myself if a caller is unfamiliar, but we've asked you like a very basic question because you called in with the assertion that you think there's a way to prove hell exists. That's really interesting to us. We would like to hear that. And like Matt
And to
said,
answer your
Okay.
question, no, my worldview is irrelevant, and so is Promises, to whether or not you have a rational justification for hell existing. That is a foundational problem that we've been dealing with for the 20 plus years that I've been doing this. People will call in and say, I can prove this. And then they do it over, and they do it so much that chat is mocking callers when they do it instantly, because it's, let me ask you this first. Because we fundamentally understand that there's no question you could ask us that in any way is relevant to whether or not you have a rational case for something. And it's only some subconscious avoidance of making that rational case that leads people to ask that question. I'm not here to be interviewed. I'm happy to answer questions on occasion, but right now your job is to make a defense for hell. Are you going to do that?
Yeah, I did not mean to step on toes, and by any stretch of the imagination. The reason why I wanted to ask that is, I guess,
then just
at this
do
point,
it.
kind of irrelevant.
Then just do it. Then just do it. Then just do it.
Okay, sounds great. So I would say that it is hard to, quantify something that would be categorized as supernatural by
Johnny,
your testing.
I don't need disclaimers, caveats. Oh, it's going to be hard. I don't need a narrative about the attempt to justify the position. I just need you to justify the position.
Okay, sure. So I would say the two strongest evidences would be married together, which would be the idea that most cultures throughout history have some way, shape, or form worshipped a deity. And then I also think that that's married with the idea of the existence of an objective morality. And I think that if you
wait,
those
hold on.
two and marry them together.
Wait, is this, I thought we're talking about proving that a hell exists.
Yes. So the reason why I say those two things is because I think
Johnny, I have no idea how the idea that people have believed in gods would be proof that a hell exists, or even lead us to being able to determine if one does.
Similarly,
sure.
the thing that you're trying, hang on. Similarly, the thing that you're trying to marry it to an existence of an objective reality. First of all, I reject the notion that there's necessarily an objective reality, but I would hope that you're aware that even a number of different Christian denominations and traditions that accept that there is a deity, specifically a Christian deity, and think that there is an objective morality, whether there is one or not, do not, in fact, believe in a literal hell. There's this entire doctrine called annihilation theory that does not have this concept. So how is it you can make a case for something by saying a lot of people believe something, and when you tie it to this other thing, it doesn't necessarily lead to this, but I think it might?
Because whether you believe in annihilationism or other views of hell, objective morality still exists. And the idea that because objective morality exists and we can know for sure what is right and wrong, eventually because right and wrong is tied to the idea of justice, then eventually there is some sort of justice that must be had
it's not.
on a metaphysical plane.
Johnny,
okay.
Even if objective morality exists, that does not mean that justice exists, or that justice is guaranteed, or that justice is exacted after a life, or that any sort of afterlife exists. None of that necessarily follows from your two dubious points.
Okay, so why do you say that?
Because it's true that you cannot construct a syllogism where therefore hell likely exists is a conclusion from people believe in a God and there is objective morality. That does not in any way, it's simply a non sequitur by definition.
Okay, do you believe that objective morality exists or no?
Probably, definitely not in the sense that you do. I had a conversation with Ian last week, actually, and I'm starting to shift my perspective on whether or not there is some way to establish objective moral truth, but not in the way that religions advocate for it.
Okay, I think that's really interesting, and I'm interested. I would love to know more at some point, down the road, if you do a video about what it is that you're shifting towards, because I've watched a lot of your content, and I think that's a really interesting shift for you. But I guess my question would be is, I'm going to try to be TOS sensitive. My question for you would be, is grape wrong?
Let's say that for a second that you and I both agree that grape is in fact objectively wrong. We won't, argue about whether it's, situational ethics or anything. We'll just both agree it's objectively wrong. That in no way demonstrates that there is an existence after life where justice is exacted based on that objective fact. That morality is about the here and now, and it does not in any way guarantee justice.
Sure. I would say, though, that if you and I agree that it is objectively wrong and that any grape, assuming, outside of extenuating circumstances like you were saying, if grape is wrong and if every single grape that has ever existed is wrong, how do we ground that outside of some sort of deity, whether it's the Christian God or not?
That's irrelevant to whether or not there's a case for hell. My grounding, I'm sorry. The closest I can get to a grounding, which is what Ian and I are talking about, is that to the extent that there can be a foundation, it has to be about freedom to act. Because without that, you cannot have any other evaluations of anything like that. But none of that has to do with whether or not there's a hell. So I need you to demonstrate a hell.
Okay, well,
right. Because
so
I can just say, no, because Johnny, I can just say that I believe in fairies and that they went around and whispered in our ears moral code when we were babies. And that's where morality comes from. And then when we die, nothing happens and our lives are over and that's it. So I can use the exact same. So I really have zero idea what this has to do with the existence of a hell.
Yeah. So the reason I bring it up is because if more objective morality exists, then we have to ground it outside of something that exists within humanity, because there has to be something exists that is transcendent.
Are we talking about hell, or are you wanting to have a completely different conversation, or are you getting to a hell exists? Because I don't care if you think that it needs something. That is not an actual argument. You thinking, it needs something is not actual evidence or proof, as you called in to say you could prove hell exists.
Yeah. So the reason why I'm bringing all this up is because I'm getting there. I'm getting to why this matters in the idea that hell exists. So and it'll be super quick if I can it'd be 20 seconds, maybe even less than that. If objective morality exists, then there has to be something that exists outside or that creates that objective moral standard. And most of the time that has to be some sort of God or deity. And most religions that have been around since the beginning of time all have a dichotomy of good versus evil and a good place versus a bad place. And then what that means ultimately is you're trying to transcend to that thing, whether it's heaven or nirvana or whatever it is. And on the flip side, there's an evil place that you're going, or a place
you went through such a massive leap.
No.
Again, my little fairy example still works. I could just say, no, the fairies went around and whispered morality into our ears, and that's why we feel this way. Because I personally, I don't believe that objective morality exists. And so you still have, you're just like, well, because a lot of people believe this, therefore hell exists. That is such a huge jump. I don't understand how you're getting there.
You're stacking up. You're stacking up. You're stacking up leaps. Everything about your argument is flawed. First of all, it's not a valid structured syllogism at all. But the fact that a lot of people believe there's an objective moral reality or objective moral truth doesn't mean there is. And the fact that there is, if in fact there are objective moral truth, does not in fact tell you what they require as a foundation. For example, as I was saying when Ian and I were talking, it is about that at a minimum there must be the freedom to act, and so you must assert that moral foundation, that must objectively be the case because you can't have anything else. That moral view of objective morals does not require any external foundation. And even if there was an external foundation, the fact that people believe there ought to be justice does not mean there's justice. As a matter of fact, the evidence is strongly against the notion of justice in this life, which is why religions try to appeal to some other life that they cannot demonstrate exists because they think justice exists there. But the bulk of religions have some loophole for the justice. So, for example, if you slaughter an entire civilization, but you accept Jesus into your heart and you are sincerely redeemed, there are Christian models that suggest you get to go on to the afterlife that is the good one. And that's not justice. By definition, that is a suspension of justice. Justice means you get what you deserve. Mercy is an exemption from that justice. And so not only do most people believe that this might be the case, but that doesn't mean it is, that it doesn't necessarily mean the foundation is external or that justice involves a hell. So you've done what's called the plural of anecdote isn't data. And you are, I like, there's an example that I've used. You're doing compound inference. This implies this, which implies this, which implies this, which means I'm rationally justified. When from the very beginning, you can't get from step one to step two without an unwarranted leap. What people believe to be the case or what people hope or wish is the case does not in any way tell you what ought to be the case. And we could all agree that grape is wrong. We could even agree that grape is objectively wrong, and that wouldn't tell you anything at all about why it's wrong or whether or not there's some sort of justice in this life or whether there's another life to extract justice. This is compound inference.
Right. So this exact statement that you made.
I don't know why you have to say anything after right.
What's that?
You said you started with the word right. Thanks. What else you got?
No. Well, it's not what I meant. What I meant is I meant right as in I hear and I agree and I understand. Well, my point is like the reason why in the very beginning of this conversation, I wanted to ask you about, or ask the both of you a little bit about your worldview is because like, sure, yeah, we're talking about the supernatural, and yes, the supernatural can be very hard to prove and talk about in a concrete way. But the reason I wanted to ask you guys about your worldview, what do you mean very hard to prove?
Is there any way to prove the supernatural at all?
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you guys. I wanted to see if there's anything that you
I'm
guys
sorry,
would have
I'm
believed
asking
in,
you.
whether it's...
I am not convinced there's any way to prove that the supernatural is real. There's a reason that science doesn't make any appeals to the supernatural because it seems to be an untestable, unfalsifiable, uninvestigatable proposition. And it doesn't, there's no reason for you to ever ask me a question about what I think about something. Are you convinced that it's possible to rationally demonstrate the supernatural? Yes or no?
Well, I would say that it could be a rational reality.
Oh my fucking God. Oh my God. Johnny, are you convinced it's possible to demonstrate the truth of the supernatural? Yes or no?
I mean, I would say so if we can prove it with the scientific
Never
method.
fucking mind. I don't care. Never mind. I don't care. I give up. Promise I suck at Johnny.
Well, see, the thing is like you're kind of granting yourself a lot of positions in this. Like you're kind of granting yourself logic
Johnny,
and reason and
we
testable
haven't-
evidence without having any like follow-up conversation about it.
Johnny, you fucking
sort of common
liar.
ground.
Johnny, you fucking liar. I asked you a question. I'm not granting me anything. I tried to find out what your fucking position was. Are you convinced that it's fucking possible to fucking rationally fucking defend the existence of the supernatural? That's a yes or no question. You're either convinced of it or you are not. What my view is, or what you think I'm granting, or how you're trying to shut the fuck up, or how you're trying to dance around it, is irrelevant to whether or not you are convinced of something. And the fact that I can ask you that multiple times and you will not answer the fucking question shows you're not worth talking to.
Okay. I would say that it's provable through objective morality.
Cool. I don't think that,
like, I know these.
Again, I'm back. We still haven't responded to my thing. First of all, I'm not convinced that objective morality exists. Second of all, there is nothing connecting, even if it did, connecting that to a hell existing or any afterlife existing. You're basically saying, hey, I think objective morality exists, therefore I think an afterlife has to exist, but you're not providing any connecting dots between those or any form of evidence.
Sure. Could I make an attempt again?
Sure.
Okay. Would you say that murder is wrong in every single circumstance?
Johnny, we're not going to do the questions game, because you should be able to, like, if you're writing a paper to convince people that this is real or putting something out there, there's lots of people that are watching this that are going to answer differently than me, maybe. And so what I think about any of this, what I think about morality, what I think about hell, what I think about religion has nothing to do with whether or not you can offer us evidence that hell exists.
Okay. I mean, like, I think that it's not that like, if you play in the theist sandbox for a second, I don't think it's that irrational to deduce that objective morality, because it exists, there's something that exists outside of it.
I would have to become
it has
irrational to play in that sandbox, because then I would be saying that I think a God exists. But even then, I still am not getting from a God exists to an afterlife. I'm just not. There's nothing connecting those dots. Because I shared with you my thing.
Right.
What if my little fairies are what created us, and they whispered moral code into all of our ears when we were born, and that's how all of this came to be. And then when we die, they just, let our souls or whatever you want to decide they've created just disappear, and we don't exist anymore. Like somebody could easily believe in a God claim without believing in an afterlife. So there's been no connecting dots there. And we still can't grant you that, because that's a huge thing I would have to believe is in some objective force that would have created this afterlife. And we didn't even get there.
Sure. I'm not familiar with every single religion in the world, but I would say that most religions, like we were talking about, have some sort of dichotomy of good versus evil, good place, bad place in the afterlife. And so I don't think it's that large of a stretch. I'm sure there are religions that exist where they don't believe in any afterlife, but still believe in a moral code, a good versus evil code, whether an afterlife exists, for sure.
Yeah, since we're just repeating stuff, I'm curious, because we have so many other callers that I want to make sure we get to, and we're running out of time. So I think it might be time to move on from this call, but let me just confirm. So do you actually have evidence that a hell exists, or do you think it's likely because you think a bunch of other people believe this thing?
So I would say that even if I did have concrete evidence, I just don't think you guys would choose to believe in it anyway.
Well, you didn't share any, so
fuck right off. Fuck right off, you dishonest motherfucker. Everything about what you say. See, here's the thing. If we're going to say, I have evidence for a claim, whether you're in science or a court of law, you don't get to question the jury. You present the evidence. And you little coward, after being schooled on the fact that just because people believe there's objective morality doesn't mean there is. And if there is, that doesn't mean that the reason there is necessarily supernatural. You think that you can demonstrate that the supernatural is real because you believe that there are objective morals and because you believe there can't be objective morals without a supernatural. But if I could get a hold of him right now, I could bring Ian in to explain this better than I could because I'm still processing through it, where Ian's been dealing with it for quite a while now. Ian would acknowledge that to the extent that we might be in the position of advocating for objective morality, there's nothing supernatural about it. As a matter of fact, the foundation is that in order for there to be any possibility of a moral assessment, it must be objectively the case that we permit the freedom to enact those moral foundations. And so therefore, the closest thing we have to an absolutely objective moral foundation begins with the freedom to make those assessments. And that is not in any way appealing to the supernatural. And then when we point out that you're stacking all this up, then you do the absolute weak-ass, awful, well, I think I could, but I don't think you guys would accept it. Yes, because we're rational individuals who are expecting evidence and arguments that aren't fallacious. When you present fallacious, non sequitur arguments that are based on, I think this, which implies this, which implies that, which implies this, and ta-da, now I'm at a good reason to believe in hell, you are demonstrating that you are not a rational thinker. And when you back out and pretend that we're going to object to it, all you're doing is saying, wow, you guys are too rational and too well informed for me to try to bamboozle with my questions in order to manipulate your worldview into buying into the same bullshit that I bought into. Not going to work. Done this too long. Bye.
Yeah, sorry, I already dropped him, because if you start the call off wanting to ask us questions, I try not to assume, because sometimes it's not because of this issue, but I feel like it almost always is this issue where this person is like, let me figure them out, because they're so arrogant to think that they could somehow just emotionally manipulate or pull a gotcha, and let me focus on your thing and why that's wrong, instead of actually having to provide evidence for my assertions, which is what ended up happening here. He was frustrated that we weren't going to let him go down that path, and then ends the whole thing with the most dishonest sentence. Well, even if I had concrete evidence, I don't think you guys would accept it. That is no different than somebody being like, yeah, I got this new girlfriend. I'm like, oh, cool. Can I meet her? Well, I would let you meet her, but I already know you wouldn't like her anyways. So that's why you can't meet her. And that's why I don't have evidence that she exists. It's like, bro, that is worse than if you had just said, okay, thanks. I guess we couldn't have this conversation and I'll move on. You make yourself look even weaker in your lack of argument than if you just had
this is what con artists do. And this is what fast-talking salesmen do. Let me ask you this. Can you picture yourself in a car like that? Are you tired of the car you've got? Would you like cleaner walls? Would you like this? Would you like that? Is this what you're looking for? Let me help you out here. I've got just a solution for you. Tune in today. I can get you to heaven. It's a fucking con, and we are beyond it. When you have an actual case for something, you present it. When there's a scientific paper, it doesn't ask the audience. There's not a fucking scientific paper out there, probably, that starts with, let me ask you this. Have you ever wondered how this drug might impact this disease? Well, let me tell you, if you have, do you also believe in the germ theory of disease? No, you present the fucking evidence. And you know what's true? You don't have any. Just like the historical stuff from earlier, you don't have evidence. It's not just me, and it's not just Promise. It's not a bunch of obstinate skeptics or atheists being, well, we're just not going to listen to what you have to say. No, there's a reason. The entire process of science is based on and rooted in methodological naturalism. Science doesn't say the supernatural isn't real. Science says we don't get to appeal to the supernatural until such time as someone demonstrates the supernatural is real. And how do we go about doing that? We don't know. And nobody's ever presented any sort of case or model or description of how one might be able to tell that anything supernatural exists, or if there is something supernatural, that you can confirm that it does, in fact, impact reality in any detectable or testable way. That's not a problem with science. That's a problem with your claim. If your claim can't rise to that level, it is not rationally warranted. That's not our fault. You guys are just too rational. Thank you. Goodbye.
On that note, do you want to pick our next caller so I can go grab some water?
God, no. No.
You don't?
Well,
okay,
actually,
yeah?
Tim.
Okay. Wow. That would have been my last pick. So I'll bring Tim on and I'll go grab some water. Hey, Tim, you are live on the Sunday show with Matt and Promise. How are you doing?
Thank you. Thank you. You can go away. I want to talk to this guy. What's this guy's name, first of all? Because I've never seen somebody prove that there's a hell more than this guy. This guy's completely living in his own hell. The last caller completely decimated and made you guys totally look foolish. And why is the atheist calling for God? I don't understand it.
I know you don't understand it. That's because you weren't actually paying attention.
No. Why'd you call for God, buddy? Tough guy who can talk like this only on a computer. You know you wouldn't talk like that in real person. Guy like you, and we know you like Ian, would be calling for Ian. Why did you call for God? That's my question. That's all I want to know.
I'm sorry. So you want to know? I didn't call for God. I exercised a colloquialism, and I do it. I'm sorry. Are you going to interrupt me, or are you going to let me answer your question? That was a question. Oh, you ran away. Well, let me tell you something, tough guy, about what I would or wouldn't do in person. You should go look up a debate that I did with Daniel Hikikachu. I know it's going to be difficult for you to spell, but just look for one of the many Muslims that were advocating for child rape, who dared during a debate while we're sitting there on stage to say, I bet you wouldn't say that to my face. And I got up and walked over and stood there and said it to his face. I'm not afraid of you. I'm definitely not afraid that your God or your hell. I don't think your God can give me so much as a hangnail. I'm not the slightest bit bothered by your bravado. And your confusion is something that I've been dealing with for more than 2 decades. I don't necessarily know what type of believer you are, because you ran off like a little bitch, which I would say to your face too, because you know what? You might be able to kick my ass. So what? Like, genuinely, I'm 57. I've had a triple bypass. I'm not in the best shape. I'm lighter than I used to be, but I don't get into fights. But I'll say it to your face. And what can you do? You could probably kick the shit out of me, at which point I would have you arrested and then I would sue you. And at no point would it demonstrate which of us is right. But you've demonstrated how your thought processes work, that you think you're more likely to be right because you can talk shit about what a coward I am when you then go and run off. I mean, I don't even need to put up a poll here to see what the audience thinks. But let's assume for a second that you think you're coming in here to defend Jesus. I've turned the other cheek. All you did was show me the 2 cheeks of your backside as you ran away. Which one of us is cowardly again? Oh, which one of us is actually engaged in a conversation where we're expecting evidence and rational argument? Yes, when I say, oh my God, that's a colloquialism. Like when I say, Jesus fucking Christ, that's a colloquialism too. I don't think Jesus was actually fucking Christ. I just know that it irritates dipshits like you who don't understand the world and don't understand these conversations. I know it irritates people who are in the style over substance category, who think that there's dirty words and phonemes, rather than being offended by the things that should offend people, like bigotry, corruption, theft, everything MAGA and Project 2025 and these other fascist organizations are advocating for, the denial of basic human rights and dignity. The things you should be offended for, like the fact that the Bible supports slavery and misogyny, the fact that if you're right about your God and your God's actually out there, that he has stranded you, that he is basically punking you. He's been like, hey, watch this. excuse me, go call into that show and show him what a tough guy you are. Do it for me. Do it for your God. Show him. Your God's treating you like a plaything if he exists, doing nothing to demonstrate he exists. And I schooled you. I've schooled your God. I've schooled the last caller. It's embarrassing. You know who I didn't school? The guy, the first caller that we took, Jack, where we had a good conversation, where people were honest, where Jack acknowledges the limitations of what he's saying, and we don't dig in. We didn't try to make any claims. It was, hey, let's have another conversation another time about this, because Jack understands the subjects at least well enough to know what the limitations are of the positions that he's advocating for. And as somebody who's done this for ages, why was I calling for Ian? Oh, because Ian's awesome. Like I'm just one of the many, I've just done this longer than a lot of other people. There are people who are demonstrably more knowledgeable than me and better at this than me on a number of different subjects. Not every one of them. Everybody's got their own, little ballywick and their own areas of expertise, but we have some amazing people on here that I just love to do shows on. But I'll tell you this, I would not have said, I think there's any likelihood of objective morality at all. That the closest I come is because there's a difference between, objective and subjective and absolute and relative. I definitely don't believe in relative moral views, and I don't believe in absolute moral views. Instead, I'm talking about situational ethics. But Ian, in the case, in a span of probably 5 minutes or less, maybe much less, it might have been like 2.5 minutes, made a concise case for what he's talking about when he talks about objective morality, and almost completely changed my mind. And in a conversation that happened around the same time, I made a case for my position about the claim not being evidence for the claim. And I think Ian agreed with me on what I was saying there, whether or not in a different context you would change it. This is what happens when grown-ups who are knowledgeable and studied in a particular area, even if they don't have the greatest expertise, communicate. It's not because we've got some technical jargon. It's because we're able to think. We're not on autopilot. We're not looking for somebody to give us the answers. And we're not looking to defend a God that is too weak to fucking show up and defend itself. All right, we got any more callers?
Looks like we do. That was a fun pick. Good thing Tim didn't want to talk to me anyways, so.
Yeah. I don't want to talk to him. I want to talk to that dude. Cool. How'd that go for you, dude?
That was wild. Do you want to talk to this last one here? Caller 2. You good with that?
Yeah, whatever.
Cool. Hassan, you are live on the Sunday show with Promise and Matt. How are you today?
Taking my call.
Can you hear us?
Hello?
Yeah.
Oh,
welcome to the show.
I think.
Yeah, thanks.
So it says you believe that God communicated by a messenger?
No, I'm on iPhone.
No. It says here you believe that God communicated via messenger, right?
Yeah, actually, my belief that if God cannot give you the information and preserve information or clear information, then there is no way that we can believe him, because he is the one who created everything and human being. It is obligation for him to provide the proof and information and evidence for him. So that's where I come. So what I learned about all the religion, and I studied the Prophet Muhammad. He was born in 570, and then he reached the age of 40. He was known as a trustworthy and truthful. So that God introduced the human being as a trustworthy and truthful, and then he sent angel Gabriel to him to deliver the message.
Wait, why did God need to use all these people? Why can't God do the job himself? Why does he need messengers?
Well, that's basically God has so many attributes. So Prophet Muhammad said that God has uncountable attributes. He gave us some 99 attributes. One of them
Why wasn't one of those attributes?
But a bitch ain't one?
Why wasn't one of those
them is
attributes?
This means he's the truth. He's the truth.
But why
Is one of them sexually
He's
one of them
all-wise.
marrying 9-year-olds and having sex with them?
No. That's not in the Quran. These are the books were written.
I didn't say it was in the
300 years
Quran.
after the Prophet.
I didn't say it was in the Quran. That is a claim about that is it. I didn't say it was in the Quran, did I?
No, it's not in the Quran.
But did it happen?
The books, these books were written.
Did it happen?
After the Muhammad left only the Quran.
Did it happen?
Muhammad left only Quran.
Did it happen?
Yeah.
Okay. So God picked a guy. God picked a guy. I'm sorry.
Those are
I'm sorry.
No, those are
I'm sorry. You're saying that God picked. I'm sorry that you're saying that you're saying that Allah picked Muhammad because he was truthful, but he also picked someone who married a 9-year-old and consummated that relationship, right?
But that's not confirmed because
I'm sorry.
We have to distinguish.
I asked you if that happened, and you said yes.
Can you answer his question, Hassan? Can you please answer his question?
Did Muhammad have sex with a 9-year-old or younger girl?
No.
No. How do you know that? Because you said the story happened.
See, if you have a daughter, if you have a daughter,
I'm sorry.
9 years,
how do you know that didn't happen when the story say it did?
How are you going to bring a 9-year-old if you have a child 9-year-old in your house? That
I'm
never
sorry.
happened. Because these
I'm
were
sorry.
accounts. These accounts were
are you
written
saying he
up to
didn't
300
marry a
years later.
9-year-old? Wow, it's really difficult. Are you saying he did not marry a 9-year-old?
No, he did not marry one. No.
Okay. Why is that claim out there then?
Well, because the earlier books were written, the people have their opinion. Because in Islam, it goes by the opinion. There are scholars, they look at this because these are all human words.
So then why did
like
God communicate, Hassan? Then why did your God communicate in such a shitty way that people could end up believing a false thing like that?
No, he did not communicate that through book. You have to judge through the Quran first. If there is no age
Hassan, why can't God deliver this news?
See, I can write a book anything about anybody. So God's not going to come and send angel and correct everybody right now. So he sent the last prophet, last revelation, and people this revelation is memorized by over 50 million people around the world.
Hassan, you keep going off on other things. Are you saying that the Hadith are wrong when they say that Aisha got married at 6 and it was consummated at 9?
No, Hadith are weak, not wrong. Weak means you can't take a religion because if there are conflicting other accounts outside this Hadith, there are accounts outside the Hadith which conflict with this age. So when there is a conflicting account outside the Hadith,
let me ask you this then.
Take Hadith as a
let me ask you this.
This is the rule in the
I'm sorry. Wow, it's like you can't even fucking hear me. So you're saying the Hadith is unreliable, right?
Yeah, exactly. Unreliable.
Okay. If the Hadith is unreliable, if Muhammad had married a 6-year-old, would that be okay?
But that's a hypothetical.
No, yes, I'm sorry. That is a hypothetical. If Muhammad had married a 6-year-old, would that be morally okay or not?
That has to be judged by the people around him first.
No. I'm asking you. I'm asking you. I'm asking you. Is it morally permissible at any time for anyone under any circumstances to marry a 6-year-old? Yes or no?
Not marry. A contract can be signed without the consummation of marriage.
I'm sorry.
Those traditions were there in the tribe.
Okay.
So those let
me phrase it this way, Hassan.
Yeah.
Let me phrase it this way. Is it morally permissible to contract a 6-year-old to marry?
But let's say if before
this is the embarrassing nature of you trying to defend your garbage religion, Hassan. No, you're gonna stop. You're gonna stop for a second. I'm gonna lecture you because that's the fucking rules. Because your religion is the religion of a pederast and sanctions it. I've debated Muslims many times before in the past, including one who says that it would be permissible to consummate a marriage with a 4-year-old if precocious puberty came on. And that's why, like, if you were to ask, here, let me just double check, promise, just to check me. Is there any circumstance under which it would be permissible to either marry a 6-year-old or contract to marry a 6-year-old?
No.
No. And part of the reason for that is not just about the ages involved, but also a 6-year-old can't fucking consent to anything, right, including marriage, and certainly not consummation. You are an embarrassment, Hassan, because you have bought into a religion that puts you in a position where you have to hem and haw and tap dance. And well, no, that's not authoritative. Or no, it has to be this. It wasn't a marriage, it was a contract. It was this, it was this. The fact that you have sacrificed your humanity, your dignity, and your morality on the altar of a fiction of a murdering illiterate pederast is embarrassing. And then to pretend that Allah, who's not real, chose Muhammad because he was a good person when the stories reject those things is embarrassing. But let's set aside all of that. I'm going to give you a golden opportunity. Let's not talk about Muhammad. Let's not talk about the prophet. We don't even have to dig in on problems within the Quran or Hadith. You said you have proof of God. I would like for you, when I unmute you, to say, the proof of God is this, and then let's discuss it. We'll set aside the fact that your religion is garbage, and we'll discuss whether or not you're correct that God communicated through a messenger. So how can you demonstrate to us that, in fact, God communicated a message through someone else?
Yeah, he communicated the message. We have to read it, and then you find out the problem in the Quran. But there are a million hadith. So I'm not going to go to millions hadith.
Okay, I'm going to mute you. I'm asking you to demonstrate how we can know that God communicated the message. Am I understanding correctly? Are you saying the only way we can know it is to read it?
Yeah, only way we can know it if God can send the message to us. And that's where then otherwise
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
God is obligated to provide the proof. We are not.
I don't understand. Do you realize that when I say I don't understand and I'm asking for clarification, that if you just keep rambling, that doesn't solve a thing? How can I know that God communicated a message?
Well, we got the historical account from Prophet Muhammad that he was visited by Angel Gabriel. He delivered the message.
I don't believe that. I don't believe the claim. I don't believe the claim. I'm asking you, how can I know the claim is true?
Okay, so that's basically, we are here is with the testimony. We can look at the content of the Quran. And God says, I have so many signs provided in this book. You can reflect on that and you get the proof. Actually,
you sound exactly like everybody else that calls in with any other religious claim that has nothing to do with Allah. So I don't understand, like, you're not giving us anything.
Well, so then we don't have to worry about it. If you think that Allah cannot give you convincing proof, then he will not going to judge us. That's it. Don't worry about that.
Okay. I don't need to worry about it. Thanks. Thanks, Hassan. Keep pretending that you have a good reason for belief, and then when people ask you to provide the reason and you failed to even offer anying that could be a good reason.
The Quran is the proof. If you
the Quran is not the proof. How could the Quran prove that a God exists? That's what I asked you.
Because the Quran gave the examples. Let's say first the definition of God. He say he is Allah, the one, the self-sufficient. He begets not, nor is begotten, and there is none like him. So he says
that's a claim.
No God beside him.
I'm sorry, Hassan. That is a claim. I don't believe it. Where's the proof for it?
Well, there cannot be any scientific proof, empirical proof, or philosophical proof. This is the communication.
Then there can't be any proof. Then there can't be any proof. I didn't ask you, Hassan, for the scientific proof, or the philosophical proof, or the empirical proof. I asked you, what's the proof? And all you did was tell me the claim again. What is the proof that the claim is true?
Proof is the Quran, which you can reflect on it. You can understand it. If you have a problem with that, you can ask the scholar. You can discuss with that.
No. That's not how we prove things. I've read the Quran. I've looked through it. I find some of its claims to be banal and some of its claims to be unproven. Asking a scholar does not provide me new evidence. It just tells me what somebody else thinks about it.
But what I did actually, I wrote down the questions which I had on my paper and gave the Quran, and he answered all my questions. Okay. So that's basically, I will say, all you put all the
good for you, but how do I know that you're not just a gullible buffoon? How do I know that you're not just a gullible buffoon? What was your standard of evidence that the Quran proved?
First of all, I put the question, why we have so many religions? The God says, I created a human being, one community, and later on they were put on a test. He says, I test human beings.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Hassan. Listen. You just keep going back to, you had this question and you asked God and the Quran said something. I understand that you can find within the Quran or the Bible or the Bhagavad Gita or countless other religious scriptures, things that you find compelling. I'm not asking what you are convinced of. I'm asking, how can we show that it's correct?
See, the other book you just mentioned, Bhagavad Gita, Bible, that does not make a claim they're from God. The Quran makes the claim this is the word from the Lord of the world. There are many words.
Let me try this again, Hassan. The Quran makes a claim that it is the word of Allah, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And how do you prove that that claim is true?
Okay, well, now what kind of proof we're going to say? God said there is nothing like me, so he cannot come and show himself. He cannot give a prophet or messenger message and deliver that.
God can't show himself?
Said there is only one
God can't show himself?
There is only one God to be worshipped.
God can't show himself?
How are we going to show himself? He's going to send a prophet or messenger to convey the message.
Why can't God show himself? Why can't God show himself?
Because he is not like creation. He said worship the prophet.
I don't know what he's like. You're still just talking about a claim. So you're basically, listen very carefully, Hassan. I'm being as kind as I fucking ever will be to people advocating for a garbage religion that advocates for that other bullshit. Here's the thing. You say the Quran says it's from God, and I say, how do you prove that? And you say, well, I don't know how God can prove that because God can't reveal himself. And I say, why can't God reveal himself? And you say, because he can't. How do we know that God can't, or how do we know why God can't? You have nothing. Please demonstrate to me that there is a God that cannot reveal itself, which you think you know of. How do you know of it if God hasn't revealed itself?
What God says in the Quran, these are the signs, And
no, the Quran says something. No, I'm sorry, Hassan. God doesn't say a fucking word. The Quran says things. I'm trying to get you to prove that the Quran is in fact the word of God.
In the Quran, actually.
No,
Quran
sir. No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. God does not say shit in the Quran until you demonstrate that it is in fact God saying something in the Quran. How do you show that it's God saying something in the Quran?
So Muhammad never claimed that he wrote this book.
I didn't ask you a fucking thing about Muhammad right now. I'm saying, how do you stop, Hassan? Hassan, are Muslims stupider than Christians when it comes to apologetics? The question is really simple.
No, there's no apologetic because if there's information available, Muhammad never claimed that he wrote the book.
I didn't ask you what the fuck Muhammad said.
He delivered to us.
I'm asking you about what you said and what the Quran says. But you are absolutely embarrassing, Hassan. Here we go. This is really easy. Does the Quran claim to be the word of Allah? Yes or no?
Yes, that's true. It says actually.
Just yes or no for now. You're back in kindergarten mode.
Yeah.
So the Quran says it's the word of God. Okay?
Yes.
Can God reveal itself? Yes or no?
God revealed to Muhammad through angel Gabriel.
Jesus fucking Christ. Can God reveal himself? Yes or no?
God revealed himself in what form? In the form of the Quran?
Yes or fucking no?
But he revealed in the Quran, yes. basically.
Hassan, can you answer any of the questions that are being asked?
No,
This
Hassan
is
can't
really
answer any
painful.
questions. No. Hassan, let's try this again.
Okay.
The Quran claims to be from God, right? Yes?
Yes.
Can God reveal himself? Yes or no?
Yeah, reveal himself in the Quran, actually, in the form,
Jesus.
in the message of the Quran. Yeah.
What in the Quran confirms that God reveals himself?
He gave example of previous prophet also too. He says, I delivered the message to Moses, delivered the message to Jesus, delivered the message to Abraham.
Hassan, Hassan, the Quran claims that God said he previously revealed things to Moses. Yes?
Yes.
Where is the evidence that God actually revealed something to Moses?
Well, we get the historical account. We still the people, children of Israel still exist.
Hassan,
that.
where is the evidence? Hassan,
2.5 billion
Hassan,
Christians, 2 billion Muslims.
Shut the fuck up! What is the evidence that God revealed something to Moses?
He delivered the Torah, which the Quran talks about that.
What is the evidence that the Torah is from God?
Not the current Torah we have. That's what the people corrupted.
That's not what I fucking asked. Never mind, Hassan. You're going away. The answer is you are worse at apologetics than others. So our previous caller was just stacking inference on inference. In this case, Hassan says, the Quran claims to be from God. Okay, where's the evidence for that? Well, God says in the Quran, no, the Quran says you got to demonstrate this from God. Well, it says that God previously revealed something to Moses. Cool. Where's the evidence that God revealed anything to Moses? That's the Torah. Where's the evidence that God revealed the Torah? All of this is you believing stories. That's not evidence. Those are the stories. I know that you believe them. And what's weird is you, unlike some other Muslims, are willing to throw out the hadiths because they have some uncomfortable things in them. Meanwhile, you can go look up what these things say. And it's embarrassing that when I ask about, hey, are there circumstances under which it would be permissible to contract a 6-year-old to be your bride? You have to hem and haw and tap dance and go around in circles because you know that if you just say no, that would always be wrong. The Muslims who don't think it would be wrong would be coming after you. And you'd rather that they come after me. I know Muslims who I like and respect. I don't respect their religion one bit. But I genuinely know Muslims that I like and respect. And they have a very weird version of Islam that is not the one that's defended by child rapist apologists like Daniel and others. They have found a way to set all that aside in the same way that Hassan has done. Like Zoran Mamdani. Stumbled there. He's the mayor of New York. He's a good guy, good policies. I like him. If we ever got to sit down and talk about Islam, my questions would be the same as they were to Hassan. Where's the demonstration that the Quran is true? Where's the demonstration? Where's the evidence that supports the claims about Allah? Where's the evidence that shows that Zoran's version of Allah is more true than Hassan's or Daniel's or anybody else's? It's all the same. We're looking for an evidence-based justification that what you're advocating for is true. But there are Muslims and there are Christians who aren't fundamentalists, who aren't literalists. They have become convinced of the warm, fuzzy version of it. It's like, love thy neighbor, don't go to war, do this, do that. It is a way of encapsulating portions of their cultural heritage in a fictional spiritual construct. And I use the word spiritual intentionally because spirituality is still, so far as I can tell, nonsense and a cover word that lends credence to all of this. So when I talk about the problems with Islam, and we could talk about the problems with Christianity as well, Christianity is a repugnant, disgusting religion, just as Islam is. The notion of inheritable sin. The fact that women aren't regarded as equal, are barely even mentioned. There are very few women mentioned by name in any of these scriptures. Their desires, their autonomy, their freedom are not only not considered, they are actively disregarded. When you contract a 6-year-old, you are disregarding that future woman's desires. You're denying freedom before they even know they have it or should have it. And the same is true for Jephthah's daughter that gets killed. It's the same is true for every concubine and every extra wife and everything else like that. It's true in all these religions. I'm not picking out Islam as particularly worse. They're all fucking garbage. They are all the piss poor, antiquated thoughts of ignorant, illiterate, goat herding people who didn't know anything about science, reality. They didn't know anything about freedom, justice. They didn't know anything about morality beyond God says don't do this, so I'm, fire good, murder bad. And for us, this many centuries, millennia later, be having people call up who still haven't figured out how to tell the difference between what's true and what's not true, still haven't figured out how to answer the basic question of, hey, what is my evidence for this claim, is embarrassing in the extreme. And while I'm happy, Hassan, that you're a better Muslim than some of the ones I've debated, you're no better at debating or defending your religion. Oh, well, God reveals it in the Quran. Well, whoop-de-doo-doo. Prove that God revealed anything to anybody ever. You can't. Prove that there's something supernatural. You can't. Prove there's an afterlife. You can't. That's not my problem. I can sit here week after week after week after week for decades and assert that and give you guys every opportunity. And you know what you show up with? Well, the book says. Well, lots of people believed. And if lots of people believed and the book says, and lots of people believe and the book says, it might be true, it could possibly be true, maybe it's true, I think I have good reason to be true, you've talked yourself into it. You've all fallen for cons, and you're helping to perpetuate those cons. Do better. All right.
Well said.
We're not going to hell, promise. We're in hell.
Yeah, that felt like hell. You had more patience for that call than I did because you gave him so many chances to just answer one question. Who cares if it was a good answer or not, but like an answer. And there was just nothing. We've got a
Jonathan's
couple
been on hold forever.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we've got a couple callers left, and I think we'll have time for both. So let's chat with Jonathan here.
Cool.
Hey, Jonathan, you are live on the Sunday show with Promise and Matt. How are you doing?
Thank you for your patience.
I'm overjoyed to speak with you. I love you guys. I've never tried to call in before, and I think I have something to contribute.
I'm sorry you had to wait for so long.
I enjoyed the listening. It's fine. Even though I don't think those people were deserving of all the air time that you gave them, it was still a worthy undertaking, and just admire what you're doing so much.
Well, what'd you call in to talk with us about today?
Well, I just like to label myself a little bit for speed and context. I'm a Unitarian lawyer who believes in the Rainbow Bridge and Jesus because I prefer to. I think all of the evidence supporting the Quran and Bible certainly are voluminous, but I have never, ever found anything that was worth the time that they were given. Never found.
Which Rainbow Bridge are you believing in?
The Rainbow Bridge is where I choose to believe that my dearly departed father and all my departed quadrupeds are waiting for me today.
Okay, and you believe this just because it's comforting?
Conversationally convenient.
So you believe it because it's comforting, not because you have any good reason?
I think comfort is a good reason, for the same reason I think taking a placebo, if it can work, is a good reason to take a placebo.
Oh boy,
but,
you misunderstand reason and placebo. The placebo effect doesn't mean that pill does anything, right? It's not the pill that does anything, it's just you. However, if do you think that, well, do you think the Rainbow Bridge is true, or just that it's comforting? Because if you think it's true because it's comforting, that's a fallacy.
I agree. I do believe in objective truth. I do ask that you treat me as sincere, but it's okay with me if you tell me my Rainbow Bridge is imaginary or that Jesus is imaginary. I don't mind. I
have no idea whether or not I have no idea if the Rainbow Bridge, we'll just skip Jesus. Let's just go to the Rainbow Bridge. I have no reason to think that the Rainbow Bridge is true. Do you have any way to demonstrate that it's true, or just that you like it?
I can't demonstrate any objective truth, no.
And
I don't think we can demonstrate jack squat over the phone.
But do you think that it's objectively true, even though you can't demonstrate
it? Yes, but I can't demonstrate. Yeah, yes, I do.
Okay.
I don't
How many
waste a moment
things
doubting it.
Okay. Why should people believe that X is objectively true and also acknowledge they do not have evidential warrant to believe that X is true? Is preference alone a path to truth?
Yes.
Okay. That's where we fundamentally disagree. I would prefer that I were 6'2", had no heart disease, not diabetic, was, I don't know, well, built like, oh, I don't know, maybe we'll go with Jason Momoa, and that I was surrounded by the most intelligent people and that Trump wasn't president. Is there anything about those preferences that in any way impact reality other than my perception?
Well, I don't know. It depends on some definitions. And in general, my approach to problematic definitions is to ask each person to substitute their definition instead of the term that we don't necessarily agree about. And so I don't know. I mean, even the word true, does it mean objective? Does it mean
truth is that which comports with reality?
Okay. Some people would say
you're a lawyer,
worthy of belief. Yes, I told you that. I'm a patent lawyer, which we're the worst. we
evidently.
We have great big
so
dictionaries.
if somebody makes a
patent
claim, does their opinion or preference come into play into whether or not that patent is granted?
Of course not.
Okay. Is there any place else in the law or in science where somebody's personal opinion justifies a position when there isn't evidence to support it?
A jury is free to judge subjective intent, which is an element of many crimes. Yes.
Okay, but juries aren't making declarations of truth, right?
That's what a verdict literally means.
No, a verdict is what the jury has decided is their ruling. That's not a declaration of what is true. That is either what they are convinced of or what they are willing to do, because jury nullification is a thing and juries can get it wrong. If a jury convicts me of a crime that I did not commit, that's the jury saying what they are convinced is true. That's not the jury declaring what is true.
Well, perhaps we don't agree on what the word verdict means, but ver means true and dict means say, basically. So,
yes, it's what they say is true. It's not what is true. We agree on what verdict means. You're just manipulating it, and I'm not. Verdict means what they say is true, but what they say is true is not necessarily what is true, correct?
Sure, yes.
Okay. How do I tell the difference?
They can get it wrong.
How do I tell the difference between, okay, somebody believes X is true. How do I tell the difference between whether that is a delusion or an accurate representation of reality?
How do you tell the difference? I can tell you how I tell the difference. I can probably predict how you might suggest to tell the difference, because you like to focus on these testability things, but I have a little bit different criteria to decide which things I go investigate. Yeah. I believe basically three types of things. One, stuff I believe based on senses and logic, because that's a great way to get prediction. Two, stuff I believe because I prefer to, and that's pure, because I prefer to. And three, stuff I believe because I'm trying to connect with someone who believes that. That's it. That's where I get my things I choose to believe.
I don't believe that beliefs are choice. I believe that you're either convinced of something or you're not, and that you do not, that there's no such thing as doxastic voluntarism. You don't choose your belief. But I do believe that you can act as if you believe. And I think that's what you're describing when you say, I believe this because I prefer to, or I believe this because I'm trying to connect with someone. You are acting as if you believe it, but you're not convinced it's actually real.
Well, if we're friends, I ask that you don't question my sincerity, and because it'll save time. If you
not
just
friends.
choose not to.
We're not friends. We're talking about truth and the justification for truth.
Okay. So I think there is. I think all right. Concerning the term,
and my friends,
truth,
by the way, would. I'm not going to be friends with people who ask me to never question their sincerity, because the truth matters. And if I think that one of my friends is delusional, or one of my friends thinks that I'm delusional in a way that's particularly harmful, I would definitely want them to question it. And the people that I'm friends with, I mean, it doesn't mean you have to be a dick about it. But all I'm saying is, if you say, I believe something because
they're just wrong, right?
All I'm saying is, if you say, I believe something because I prefer to, then the question is, how do you tell the difference between you actually believe it because you prefer to, or you are actually acting as if you believe it because you prefer it? How do you tell the difference?
Well, first of all, I recognize that my mind, like everyone else's, is subject to certain fallacies, and one of those fallacies that we can fall for is for example, is confirmation bias, and another is all or nothing fallacy. So I respectfully submit that people can influence their beliefs, and some people can influence their beliefs a lot. And so
I don't believe that is doxastic voluntarism. I believe that that's an error in thinking. Can you convince yourself that you are able to fly?
I'm disinclined to try that one, but I probably could. I can influence my belief. I believe in the power of affirmations. I believe we can influence our beliefs. And
yeah.
I believe that some people have the power to convince
Objection,
themselves that they can fly, and they
non-responsive.
jump
Go
off
ahead.
bridges.
But Jonathan, like, for example, if Matt told me right now that if I don't start believing in Santa Claus, I'm gonna get fired from the line immediately, effective immediately. And Matt has a 100% accurate lie detector test. I would love to keep working for the line. I can pretend like I believe in Santa Claus. I can act as though I believe in Santa Claus. But that 100% accurate lie detector test is going to get me fired instantly because I cannot choose my belief. I cannot just right then and there just change my mind.
I understand that you both believe that you can't choose your beliefs. I don't share your belief.
Well, can you choose to share?
Can you
our
change
belief?
it real quick?
Can I change my belief to agree with yours? I can temporarily, yes. I use a quote I've adopted from Keats, and it goes like this. I live by this. I'm certain of nothing but the holiness of the heart's affections and the truth of imagination.
Okay.
And so I can be less confident that I can choose
this
my
is
belief.
a load of sophistry that avoids the fact is you can either fly or you cannot, correct?
Define the word, and I probably can't.
Wow. Listen up, counselor. Is logic, the identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle, do you accept those?
I don't know.
There's your problem.
Are these the three laws of logic?
Yes.
Is that what they boil down
to?
Okay, I do.
That
I have studied the three laws of logic.
That the only options that everything is either A or not A, correct?
Yes.
Cool. Which means you can either fly or not fly, correct?
The reason I can't answer that is because the word fly
Jesus
needs
fucking
some definition.
Christ. It doesn't matter. The reason you can't answer it is because you don't understand the fucking basics. Everything is A or not A. If A is fly, then it's either the case that one can fly or it is not the case that one can fly. Is there some other option we're not including in this direct logical negation?
The nuance is that some people pivot fly between.
I didn't ask you about people. I'm asking you about logic. It's very clear that you are an irrational individual that does not understand the basics of logic, because while you would accept A and not A, what you don't understand is that logic is content agnostic. It doesn't matter what you put in there. Everything is either peanut butter or not peanut butter. Everything is either able to fly or not able to fly. Everything is either capable of understanding reason or not capable of understanding reason. Everything is either true or not true. There is no other option ever. That is what identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle are about. The fact that you could assent to everything is either A or not A, and then reject or not give assent to everything can either fly or not fly, demonstrates you don't have a clue what you're talking about. You shouldn't be a lawyer either.
I'm not sure we're communicating well today, Matt.
I know I'm communicating well. I asked a direct question about the foundations of logic, and you accepted it in the abstract. And then as soon as we move from the abstract to a concrete, you decided that you could no longer accept it. And that demonstrates that you fundamentally do not understand logic because it is content agnostic. Well, okay. This thing can fly, and everything else, here's a set, the set of all things that can fly, and then outside of that are all the things that can't fly. Those are the only two categories, correct?
Yes.
That's literally the same thing I asked you that you would not assent to earlier.
The reason I'm cautious about assenting to that is because okay, you guys cuss. I'm going to cuss. Language is our bitch. So different people mean different things by fly. We're stuck with that.
It doesn't matter what people mean by fly, counselor. It's content
as long
agnostic.
As they're consistent between the first and second.
It doesn't matter what
sure.
people mean. If they're not consistent, then it's an equivocation fallacy.
I'm just trying to explain that little bit of hesitance I had. I really was hoping we could talk about a different
objection, relevance.
Okay.
So everything is either A or not A, correct?
Or not fly, asterisk. Everything can either fly or not fly.
No, there's no
asterisk.
fucking asterisk. Everything can either fly or not fly. That's a direct logical negation.
I understand why you would say that. I'm keeping my asterisk.
Well, I'm not keeping the conversation going. Enjoy your delusions and your asterisks. You are demonstrably wrong about logic, and you have gotten yourself tangled up in the content and what somebody might do with it, which is irrelevant. If everything is either A or not A, then everything can either fly or not fly. Everything is either peanut butter or not peanut butter. Everything is either rational or not rational. It is a direct logical negation. No asterisk needed. If what you mean by fly is different from what somebody else means by fly, then it does not fit that model. It's an equivocation fallacy where someone's using the same word to mean two different things.
Go ahead and not look at the asterisk then.
No. I'm not going to continue until you acknowledge that the asterisk is not logically required and should not be there.
It isn't logically required. I agree with that.
So, either the Rainbow Bridge is real or not real, correct? Goodbye. Three hours almost sat on hold. Lawyer wants to dig in on his delusion so much that cannot get to the basic foundation of truth or logic. It is a fact. Either the Rainbow Bridge is real or the Rainbow Bridge is not real. By the way, where you put the not is important. It's like saying, I believe, or it's like saying either God exists or God does not exist. Where you put the not in there matters as to what you're actually negating. That's why there's a major premise and a minor premise in these things. But the fact of the matter is, whatever A is, whether A is peanut butter, Rainbow Bridge, whatever the connection is, a direct logical negation is the only other option. And the fact that you will fall over yourself trying to put an asterisk on anything that becomes specific. In the general, you're fine. And then when it gets to the specific, oh, there's an asterisk. And then when you finally are forced begrudgingly to pull the asterisk away because it is your last defense. And then I get to the thing that you cherish, that you think you believe. When it's about to be exposed, that as soon as you acknowledge either this is real or it's not real, ooh, if I assent to that, I know where the next question is going to go. And the next question is, how are we going to tell which of those is true? Is your personal preference a path to truth? Is your personal preference relevant in any way to the truth status of that claim? Everything crumbles at that point. Whatever Jonathan's religion is, or views about religion are, or the Jesus, or the Rainbow Bridge, or anything else, it all crumbles when you ask, is there good reason to think this is true? And is your personal desire or preference a path to truth? Let's see if we can do better.
I think we have to keep this one, super short too, because don't we go on to the next show in 5 minutes?
I went ahead and said it live. I don't even necessarily know how to pronounce your name. Is it Johnny or Chani? But pronouns are she, they, they're pantheist. We only have like 5 minutes left. Please just go.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. To piggyback off what Jack was saying, I think I used to be like him, and then I had enough cognitive dissonance in my life for that not to work, to where I could no longer believe that. So like following that sense of joy versus death, or life versus death, you can do that until it doesn't work. And for me, it's when for me, when I would look in the mirror and my muscles or my mustache would like make me feel like I was being lied to or uncomfortable. So like, whereas that would not be the normal experience. So like, sorry, I don't want to go too far. Or if I didn't say anything.
I don't necessarily know that I'm following. We only got like 5 minutes left, and I want to make sure you get your point out, because I don't know what it is.
Well, don't worry about that. One thing I will say is like willpower, I think, is a poison pill, because that belief in willpower is this idea that you can choose your beliefs. I find very offensive, because that's what kept me believing for so long. Because this idea that you can just have an errant thought that we are taught is evil or bad, when it's just me aligning with who I am, and then you come back to square one, right? So you can keep on taking that back and forth until, for me, what my leap of faith so much was accepting, or like realizing I can live off the rest of my life and not be happy just for other people. That didn't make sense to me. I don't think a God would do that. So that's what I started thinking back and forth, right? So I think someone needs that cognitive dissonance in our own life for it not to work for them. Like that last call is a perfect example.
Zanny, I guess I'm just a little confused. Did you call in with something that you wanted to have a conversation with us about, or were you just sharing your thoughts on the other callers from tonight?
No. I think that contrast is my only case for God, in the fact that with gray, there's nothing.
Holy crap.
For anything to exist, you need white and black.
Okay, so you're making a case for God?
Yeah, I missed that.
No, because I think everything is. I'm probably a pantheist because I think everything is God, and that's probably technically.
Why would you think that?
That everything is God?
I don't know why you'd think anything is God, let alone everything is God.
Because I don't know how anything exists without contrast, because a thing has to be something, like you said, what it is and is not. That defines a thing. That's my only.
Your case for God is that you don't know how there can be contrast?
No. I'm saying contrast is what God uses to experience itself, because otherwise there's nothing. Because otherwise you can't have experience.
Contrast is what God uses. You're saying contrast is what God uses to experience itself, because otherwise there's nothing. Not only is that not a valid syllogism, I don't know what the fuck it means.
Okay. If I start with the gray, like what I'm trying to say is, if I start with a gray block, there's no experience to be had. But now once I have some other color, whatever that be, then there's something to experience. There is an experience to exist. There's something to compare itself to. Like without that, you just don't have anything. It's null.
Okay, but for example, I'm me and promise is promise. What does that have to do with whether or not there's a God? There's definitely contrast there that we can compare things.
Because we all have a singular experience to reference to, as far as the fact that for existence to experience anything, for consciousness to experience anything, we need to have a perception of time, which therefore needs to know, like reference memory. And if you don't have memory,
we have
you
time,
can't
we
really
have
experience time.
contrast. We have time, we have contrast, we have experience. Where is there a God?
Trying to see how to say it, which is usually the problem.
Well, we got less than a minute.
Time. Okay. Well, I think the Big Bang is and all that is like it's all that crap, right? And my only room for God is the fact that
call back another time.
No,
think through what you're
sure.
Think through what you're going to get to. Call back and make a case, because there's not enough time to even address what you just said about time and stuff.
Yeah, it's the monad. The chat gets it.
Wait, was this just a prank call for the fucking monad stuff?
Wow. Well,
seriously?
I
we started
think
off
they were
with
just referencing an inside joke, but yeah.
Wow, that's a long time to wait on hold for something that is just, wow. All right. Well, no judgment in case I was confused.
Yeah,
Promise.
Jack was great. And then it all kind of went somewhere from there.
Hey, we got to turn over to another show. Where can they go to get your book?
Oh, you guys can head anywhere books are sold, pretty much. Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Target, all the places. Thanks.
It's called Gospel of Lies.
Yeah, that. Matt's better at marketing it than I am. See you guys. Do we not have music at the end of this anymore? That kills me.
There might be that we can't hear.
No,
oh, that we can't hear.
We don't
have
it.
It's just awkward. Okay, great.
It's just awkward now. I'll get it in eventually, one of these days.
I had
until
bye,
then.
everybody.
No, I know I fucked it all up. I don't know why that happened instead of wait. There we go.